Chapter 31 The Big Fish. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Once more, for the third time in his life, Korko found himself across from Duke Herak of Balat. The first time they had met when Korko's old master had entered Balat Castle with the matter of a loan to the Duke on the table. The second time, the prince had been atop the walls of Etra, staring down at the invading forces of Borna. This time, the meeting took place within his own home, albeit one he was willing to abandon soon. Even so, meeting the man here, at such close distance after so many years, still made Korko uncomfortable. Ah, Prince Korko. These are quite delectable. What did you call it? The Duke picked up a small piece of brown bread from one of the tablets which had been placed across the room and observed from all sides, with great curiosity. It's gingerbread, Korko answered in a flat tone. He would have much rather not met the man today. It was too difficult for him to keep up the facade. But if milord is only here for the food, I can just give you a couple boxes full and send you back on your way. I'm sure milord would enjoy the food much more without my company. Why would I not enjoy the company of the great Prince of Medalla, the Duke said as the tiniest smile played around his lips. Not to mention, many items on offer today are of great interest to me, and to the great kingdom of Borna. Rather than blame me for not bidding in the earlier parts of the auction, it is Master Fastgrade's own fault for not providing any desirable offers within the first few hours. Despite his best attempt at keeping a straight face, Korko grimaced in response. You don't believe that our land deeds for much of Etra's harbor and main road, our donkeys, oxen, carts and warehouses all across the south are desirable. I mean, even though you have kidnapped your own merchant company, I get why a noble wouldn't be interested in the properties of a trader, but what about you, Kalbrant of Ardor? As he spoke, Korko turned to one of the men who had surprisingly appeared together with the Duke. Kalbrant of Ardor, his former ally, stood by Herak's side with an unreadable smile on his face. They had worked together for years and as a result of their cooperation, both had grown their business by a great measure. However, the years had changed their relations. The first sign of trouble had been the mutiny atop the Delalia, together with the death of Devardur's close friend. On top of it, although both of them had gained from their arrangements, Korko's profits had always been far greater than the Etra merchants. As a result, much resentment had quietly built up within Korko's business partner, something the prince hadn't been aware of until very recently. Either way, after today their cooperation would be over for good. Ahaha, it is sad to say, but my traders do not have need of any resources on offer today. Maybe if Sire had been able to prepare better for this auction, and invited more than a small contingent of potential buyers in secrecy, he would have been more successful. Confronted with a smug smile, Korko only barely didn't slap the idiot, but before he could say anything in response, Korko was preempted by another one of Herak's new allies. Trelban, as malicious as he was greedy, had decided to twist the knife further. Yes, my traders can't find much use in these cheap properties either. Further, we need to save our money for the truly important treasures which await us after this little break. With most of Etra's merchants abstaining from the first half of the auction, it appears as if competition has been reduced. How unfortunate that Prince Korko did not manage to gain as many funds as he had expected. Truly, I must apologize. Although he didn't like Devardur's attitude, it stung much more when the self-serving Trelban did it. Just as Korko tried to step ahead to teach the idiot another lesson, a shadow entered the periphery of his vision. Boss, we need to go back. The second part of the auction will start soon, Fidelio's calm voice rang out. As always, the warrior's timing was impeccable. Right, Korko said, as his view once again zeroed in on Duke Herak. You should prepare yourself as well, Duke. You might have had your fun until now, but the lords of Kalia, Whiteport and Enila aren't people you can bribe so easily. What answered Korko was a dry laugh from a confident opponent. I have no intention to do so. After all, despite their apparent strength, the other lordships are much farther from Etra than its neighbor Borna. And Master Trelban is indeed correct. In the end, there was far too little time to prepare for today's auction. I wonder if our competitors have brought enough gold to weigh up against all the wealth of Etra and Borna combined. We'll see, Korko said in defiance, but his balled fists revealed his irritation. Without a further word, he stormed off towards the back of the hall, but not before the Duke took another shot at the prince's pride. I wonder just how Prince Korko will feel when the fruits of his labor will be taken, in their entirety, by the money I claimed of your old master Fastgrade. I will look forward to our talks after the auction has ended. Still tensed, the prince stared ahead and marched back up towards the stage. However, unbeknownst to the Duke, a sinister smile formed around Korko's lips as he left behind his enemy, and his supposed allies. Underscore 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 underscore. Like a soldier trying to hold out under machine gun fire, Korko lost all will of resistance as he listened to the volley of words which shot out of Ronnie's mouth. Any more bids from the Kalyan delegation? Is that a no? Is that a yes? If there is no interest, then I will have to count. 1. Who here is man enough to partake in the ancient Medalan secrets of sugar production? You sire out in front. No, in that case I will need to count to. 2. How about the sires from Enila? Maybe they would like to participate in this unique chance. An opportunity which will never come again. The great secrets of ancient Medalan alchemy revealed for all to see. And 3. Sold to Duke Herak of Balat for the kingdom of Borna, at a price of 470,000 guildern. At last, Ronnie brought the gavel down and announced the sale of their next last item. Although the alchemist still seemed chipper as always, fully engrossed in his play, Korko on the edge of the stage had a hard time staying in character. The reason for his troubles sat right in the center of the guest seats, as if he owned the place. Judging Duke Herak's thoughts correctly would be crucial if today was to be a success. At least so far things were looking good. At first, the Duke had retained his smug posture, spreading himself all over that seat of his in a display of lazy confidence. However, Herak had corrected his attitude as soon as the first item of the crucial auctioned items had been announced. Rather than go by the order printed on the catalogue for the guests, Korko had announced the sale of the brandy production method first, followed by the secret of sugar production. After all, the prince knew exactly which items the Duke merely wanted, and which ones he truly needed. Of course Herak was interested in all the treasures Korko had dangled in front of his face. Of course he wanted to own the secrets to brandy and sugar production. However, even more so, he needed to regain the salt mine he had lost. Even the apparent value of the mine mattered little. After the storm on the Saline Hills, Korko had been presented with a convenient excuse to close off the mines, to make sure no one could get in anymore, with no excuse. The move had fueled even more speculation, possibly launched by the Duke himself. Word went around that the new fast-grade salt hadn't come from the mine at all, and had instead been imported. Other rumormongers said that the new found salt deposits were small, a version which would explain the reason for the merchant to resell his treasured possession so soon after he had acquired it. However, whether or not Herak believed in Korko's secret salt deposit really didn't matter. In the end, the Saline Hills were a matter of pride for the Duke, who was not used to the string of humiliating defeats he had tasted at Korko's hands. Over the course of the auction, Herak's comfortable grin had disappeared without a trace. With a frozen grimace placated on the lower half of his face, the Duke held the untrustworthy catalogue between his claws and wrung the life out of the pages, like he must have hoped to treat Korko himself. Aware that his mark was staring back, the prince gave the Duke a playful wink, just to let him know that his merchant foe had switched the itinerary on purpose, to make sure the Duke would either miss out on his chance to make Borna wealthy, or hand his enemies a bridgehead in the middle of his own territory. It would mean another long, expensive war, something the Lord wouldn't be keen on, not so soon after losing the last one. After today, he wouldn't even have the money to raise additional troops, so the Saline Hills had to be his, salt deposits or not. Korko's playful little wink was all it needed to push the Duke over the edge. Driven beyond reason, the man turned to his temporary allies, the merchants of Etra who had helped fund Herak's spending spree so far. Although Korko couldn't hear their whispers, he knew that the Duke would try to convince his new friends of an additional loan. As the Duke got busy acquiring more funds, Korko prepared the last item for sale. It was the crown jewel, the one sale to make him all the money for his journey back, and the one to guarantee his revenge. Lords, ladies and gentlemen, the merchant prince started as he swaggered to the center of the stage for one last time. At last, here is the great moment we have all been waiting for. Today, you will receive the exclusive pleasure of being part of this, our most special auction. Now for sale, the greatest treasure of the fast-grade merchant company, the crown jewel of our possession. The divine mines on the Saline Hills. While Korko raised up the simple land deed, quiet hums of awe reached him from the cheap seats, but all important men in the room had no leisure to enjoy the show. Even so, Korko continued with his play. He would need to win some time for Herak to work out a new deal with his merchant partners. Not only are the hills a place of true rustic beauty, a perfect spot to set up a summer retreat. No, even more so, they are in an ideal strategic position. Along the coast and with hilly, difficult terrain, their secure placement are perfect for anyone who wishes to construct a castle. Although Korko's words seemed aimless, they were spoken for one man alone. Putting more emphasis on the mine's strategic value would further increase Herak's pressure and desperation. If the Duke didn't buy the mines back today, he would have to defend his own lands from foreign invasion. Even though the Saline Hills had been of minimal value to Herak when he had owned them, they would gain supreme importance as soon as they fell into the hands of a foreign nation. The hills, situated along the coast at the edge of Herak's territory, were the perfect place to build fortifications from which to launch raids into Borna. Korko looked over to the left, where two old friends of his had formed an unusual alliance. With a crucial matter such as the acquisition of the great brandy secrets at hand, King Albion of Whiteport had sent the good old Dr. Friegen to handle matters for him. Next to the old quack sat Walter of Canias, one of the many men his mentalist act had tricked back in Enila. Their arrival had made Korko's work much, much easier. With a temporary alliance established between the two, Whiteport and Enila had done their best to drive up the prices for the previous items, both the brandy and the sugar, to waste as much of the Duke's money as possible. Despite their best efforts, the Duke had still managed to buy the rights in the end, but he had wasted too many funds in the process. At this point, he was desperate for additional coin, desperate enough to make crucial mistakes. And of course, let us not forget the heavenly salt buried deep under the hills, unveiled by Arcavus himself. Who among the great men here will be bold enough to name this divine treasure his own? Who here will have honor enough to invest in the future of their people? With a business smile plastered all over his face, Korko stepped back, to let Ronnie and his gavel handle the rest. It was time to end the charade, time to reel in the big fish. Chapter 32 Payoff. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 8-7, do I see 8-8? Just like it had done multiple times before, another hand shot up from the right of the auction stage. The new highest bid is 880 guildern from the great king of Whiteport. What about 8-9? Anyone willing to offer 8-9? 1 million. There, still in the center of the crowd, stood Duke Herak of Balat. As the fight for the rights to his own land had heated up, nothing could hold him in his seat anymore. For a split-second, everyone went silent from the audacious offer, but soon the cheap seats returned to their murmur, while Friegen wrung his hands as he opened and closed his mouth like a fish on dry land. However, the fast-grade merchants needed to increase the ludicrous sum even further. From behind the stage, Korko observed Ronnie as he took a deep breath to reignite the fire in their hearts, the ones which had been doused by the Duke's ludicrous offer. However, someone had remained unimpressed and was even faster than the alchemist. 1,200,000. Seated next to the fretful Dr. Friegen, Walter of Canias showed much more spirit than all others in the room. Still comfortable in his chair, he leaned back, put one leg on the stool in his front and called out his bid, his enunciation impeccably clear. With a smile and a nod, Ronnie acknowledged Walter's bid on behalf of Enila. The current highest bid is 1,200,000 guildern. Do I hear mo? 1.5. Impatient, a fuming Duke interrupted Ronnie. With his eyes bulging out of his mask, he stared not at the actual auctioneer, or at the current owner of his salt mine, but only at the strange young noble who kept raising the prices. However, Walter seemed uninterested in Herak's intimidation, or in Herak's wishes. 1.7. A small smile formed around Walter's lips. Nonsense. Herak shouted in response, a trembling finger pointed towards the foreign dignitary. No matter how little Enila has spent so far, it is impossible for them to have this much money readied in Etra. In response, Hieronymus Bombasticus put on a smile as fake as his name. Lord Herak, please. Everything today has been done to order. Whether or not our bidders are capable of paying should be the concern of the fast-grade merchant company. At last the Duke stared up to the stage and put the merchants in his sight. According to rules established by your own company, any guilderns used in the auction needs to be present in Etra at the day of the auction. Yet here are Enila, Calya and Whiteport, three lordships perfectly allowed to ignore your own rules. Oath breakers is what you are, the lot of you. Rather than Ronnie, this time Brym stepped forward with a disarming smile. Duke Herak, it is very unfortunate that Milord did not acquire enough funds to keep up with his competitors, but I can guarantee on my life and honor that the same rules were applied to any participants in our auction. Lies and trickery. Do not believe for a moment that this lord will be fooled by these, as the Lord of Ballot was huffing and puffing away, Fidelio got ready to step to the front of the stage. If the grandstanding Duke lost his head, he would have to subdue the raging bear. However, a simple shake of Corco's head was enough to call back the warrior. After he had done his part for de-escalation, the prince looked back to the stage, towards the little brother he had raised over the past 5 years. Duke Herak, the young man replied with the same patient voice as before, every man who sits here today has proven that they possess the funds they have bid so far. In fact, all present lordships decided to store their own funds within a warehouse of the fast-grade merchant company for safekeeping, all except the Kingdom of Borna of course. This is something easy to check and easy to prove. Our company is about to begin its next great undertaking, so we have no leisure to let people bid beyond measure, especially if they do not have the means to pay us back. We are too busy acquiring additional funds to be held back by petty revenge. Although steam still blew from the Duke's head, his chest heaving up and down, one calm thought would tell him that the merchant prince wouldn't risk losing money over some squabble, and that he wouldn't ruin his reputation over it either. Even though violent conflict had only been just averted, Brym still retained his merchant's smile. Rather than being worried about the honorable dignitaries from Enila, Calya and Whiteport, we are far more concerned with Milord himself. Although Duke Herak has brought considerable coin with him to Etra, the current bids, together with the price to be paid from previous acquisitions, add up to more than he worth of Duke Herak's possessions currently held within the city limits. When he himself became the victim of accusations, the Duke's jaw jutted out from under his mask, as the man did his best to not explode and give the merchants further excuse to disadvantage him. Small red cracks formed on either of his cheeks, where his skin began to rupture from the tension built up over the past hour. Even his most venomous stare wasn't enough to shake Brym's tranquility. That's my boy. Corco was so proud him. At last Herak understood that without his army, any attempts at intimidation would fail, or maybe he had simply given in to the pressure around him. No matter what his reasoning was, the Duke turned to the side, over to Devarder, and did what Corco had hoped for all day. Hand me that damned paper. With a snarl, the Duke snatched away the contract he had previously declined, one which would take most of his wealth, down to his own personal fleet, if he failed to make enough money back in the following years. With aggressive movements, he signed the paper, the cold pencil almost breaking the thick sheep skin in the process. However little he wanted to risk his wealth, he had no choice at this point. As soon as the pencil's tip had left its mark behind, he stared back up towards Brym, towards the front of the stage. The kingdom of Borna bids 2,000,000 guildern. There, are you satisfied? Throughout the entire ordeal, Brym held the same warm smile as before. Of course. Since all of Master Devarder's assets are already within Etra, there is no reason to doubt his credibility. After all, Master Devarder is well reputed throughout the south. Backstage, Korko barely managed to stifle a laugh as he heard the little kid casually insult the great southern lord. The next part would be even better. 2.1. Once again the calm voice of Walter rang out, and once again it sparked a reaction from Herak. Bastard. One more bet out of you and I will spend my remaining lifetime to wipe out every member of your rotten family, down to the last child. At last, Walter himself lost his cool. His family threatened, the northern lord jumped up, with his hand on the short sword by his side. If you wish to fight, southern brute, you are free to try your luck in a duel. Come, barbarian, and taste Enila's steel. In panic, the cheap seats cleared out as all the merchants in between Walter and Herak tried to make way in the face of the inevitable clash between two beasts. A low growl escaped Herak's throat as he lowered his torso, ready for a charge. However, before the auction could be turned into a battlefield, a sudden bang stopped both sides in their tracks. From behind the stage emerged a Tau, a smoking pistol held up in his left, and an enormous mace shouldered on his right. It's an auction house, not a damn arena. You want to make a bid, please do. Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to leave. With a crooked smile and a bold stance, the fearless captain answered the aggression of the nobles. Time stretched as Lord Herak and Captain Atau stared each other down, locked together like swords in a duel. Slowly, step by step, the wolf guards placed around the room's corners closed their circle as well. Outnumbered and surrounded, it was the Duke who broke first. 2.5 million, he hissed from between his clenched teeth. It was all the money he had brought, plus all the money he had loaned. As tension sought a path of escape, the small cracks around Herak's cheeks broke way and turned into streams of blood, dripping down onto the expensive wood floor. With a sneer for an answer, Walter sat back down and crossed his legs in pretend comfort. Looks like it's your win, bumbling bear. Red droplets sprayed the seats as the Duke's head snapped back over to his earlier target. For another tense moment, Herak only stared, before he turned to leave the auction house without a further word. Sold. Ronnie's voice rang out before Herak could no longer hear him. For 2.5 million to Lord Herak of Balat for the Kingdom of Borna. Underscore 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 aha. Fuck, I'm dying. Behind the scenes, Korko was already doubled over from laughter when the gavel rang out. With tears in his eyes, he held on to the tapestry to prevent his own fall. Everyone around him must have thought he was crazy, but at this moment, he really didn't care anymore. Every time he managed to calm himself down, he thought back to Herak's impotent reactions and exploded into laughter once again. It was a release worthy of their achievement. At last they had reached their goal, at last they had taken revenge on the Duke of Balat. Only after a long time did Korko manage to regain his faculties. Boss, some tea. As soon as he had calmed down, the prince looked up and saw one of his accountants stand ready with a wooden cup of steaming tea. Ah, thank you. To quench the thirst left behind by his excessive exercise, the boss downed the drink in one go. While he still relished in the refreshment, he looked over to his employee, who stood by with an awkward face. Where is everyone? Korko asked. Ah, Sir Dedrick, the captain and Fidelio all went over to the harbor, to make sure Duke Herak would not run away with our gold coins. The young accountant did what he could do best and counted the names up with his fingers. Brimstock has taken the workers to clean out the venue and take stock of our earnings, while Master Bombasticus has been entertaining the foreign dignitaries inside the Grand Salon. We should go too. This was trouble. Even after they had achieved a goal, there was still much work to be done. Now aware of his own faux pas, Corco righted his posture and marched straight past the accountant. "Boss," the man asked with trepidation in his voice, as he tried to keep up with Corco's swift steps. "Speak up," the prince simply said. "I understand that the company's goal has been to take revenge on Duke Herak's greed towards the former Master Fastgrade, but did we truly achieve revenge?" For a moment, Corco stopped and turned. There are two things Duke Herak cares about more than anything: his reputation and his money. We took the first at the walls of Etra and in the Saline Hills. We took the second today. For what Herak has done, that should be punishment enough, I think. As if to confirm his own conclusion, Corco nodded and began his march towards the salon again. But boss," the persistent voice replied from behind, "even though Duke Herak will not have any wealth for now, he is in possession of the invaluable secrets of brandy and sugar production. Soon, he will be richer than ever before." Again Corco halted, but this time because he had reached his goal. His hand on the door handle, he turned and looked at his employee with a smile. "I think we should go over the mechanics of supply and demand again. Looks like that lesson didn't stick. Go help Brym sort out the aftermath, I'm good here." Ignoring his employee's embarrassed face, the prince opened the door and stepped inside, to the view of Ronnie, who sat on a comfortable chair and enjoyed some cake and tea. Around him were all the allies who had made Herak's defeat possible. However, rather than celebrate their victory, they were all immersed in the pieces of paper before them. Sporting a genuine smile, Corco looked over his company conspirators. There sat Dr. Friegen, Walter of Canias, Margrave Hakon of Callia and, of course, Master Colbrant de Varder. As Corco marched over, his old merchant ally looked up from his letter and waved it towards the prince. "This would be it then?" "Yup," Corco answered. "Detailed instructions for the production of sugar and brandy. One for each of you. I even made sure to make the instructions much more detailed than the ones the Duke will get. With more knowledge and more starting funds, it should be easy to beat him out and dominate these new markets. Congratulations, it's what you wanted all this time." With his face pointed at the floor, the merchant shuffled around in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. "I did never." "No, it's fine. I get it, and I don't mind. After today, we'll be working in different industries anyways, so to speak. So there's no more reason for conflict. Now, we can just be friends." Relieved, the merchant put on a smile and nodded his head. "So it is true that you intend to leave the continent. Life in Etra will be strange without the fast-grade merchants." With a sigh, Corco spent a moment to look over the fancy salon, the expensive carpets and the goblets made of clear glass, over all the things they had achieved here, in his second home. Finally, his view turned towards the window, towards the endlessly expansive world outside. "I'm the emperor after all. It's time to go home and claim my title." Chapter 33 Talent, Success, Truth. End of Book 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Lost in thought, Corco stared at the letter in his hand, the rough paper smoothed down at the edges from constant use. Despite the dramatic message, the paper itself didn't hold much content beyond it. The emperor died after illness. Soon, the funeral would be held and nominations for the next emperor would begin. In normal times, the elders of the imperial house would choose the next emperor candidate from among the princes, and in the almost 3 centuries the Pluritak dynasty had ruled over the empire, not once had they failed to nominate the crown prince. However, this time the crown prince wasn't even in the country. Corco would have to get home soon, before the nomination could be made. Although he didn't know who had written the unsigned letter, its mere existence made it clear that many people in Medalla still remembered him and honored the old traditions. Whoever his secret allies were, they would have to hold back the elders until the prince could make his way across the sea. All of this and more were things Korko could have considered as he looked down at the ominous paper. However, he wasn't focused on the contents at all, despite his concentrated stare. Instead, he considered the medium itself. The smoothed pages of paper slipped through his fingers, as he rubbed them back and forth in contemplation. Once, he had sat just the same, with a letter in his hand, ready to leave a life behind. Back then, when he had ended his first life with that cup of poison, he had been granted a second chance. Again, after 5 years, a letter would decide his fate, and force him to give up his life. This time however, things would be different. This time, he would not be gifted his chances. This time, he would carve a path for himself, with his own ability. Just as the prince thought to drop the letter in the waters of the harbor, in a pointless and harmful show of drama, someone intruded his meditative state and broke his thoughts. "Hey, boss," Dedrick the intruder said. "There's some clockmaker here to see you. The guy's got some dangerous equipment with him, so I had him wait beyond the pier." Rather than throw the paper away, Korko went with the more reasonable option. With great care, he folded it along the deep creases and returned it back to his pocket, like he had done so many times before. "Ooh, that should be our life insurance. Let's go over and take a look." With a smile, Korko pushed off of the boxes of cargo which were still to be loaded onto their ships and sauntered down Etra's pier with a spring in his step. He had been waiting for this shipment for a long time. No one spilled any nails, right? Even Dedrick's lack of enthusiasm couldn't ruin Korko's good mood at this point. Like a kid on Christmas, the prince hopped towards the lanky young man who already stood ready beyond the pier, a large suitcase in his hand. "Master Egidius. What a pleasant surprise." Korko welcomed the talented clockmaker. By chance, the prince had stumbled upon the underappreciated young master a few years prior. Back then, he had looked for an expert to help him make some of his more ambitious inventions a reality. "Master Fastgrade, or maybe should I say Prince?" With a twitch in his smile, Egidius offered an insecure greeting. "Either is fine, really. You're done with my order." As soon as the topic turned to his work, the clockmaker's eyes lit up in delight. "Yes, it is finished. Truly a product of great, fine art. Even though I do not believe it to be overly practical." As he spoke, Egidius took the suitcase in his hand and placed it on the ground. With far less theatrics than Korko would have liked, the clockmaker opened the case and revealed the 6 weapons inside. With great care, the craftsman picked up one of the short pistols with the thick, beautifully carved barrels and held it up to the prince. "So this is it, a proper wheeled lock pistol?" Korko marveled. With a nod, Egidius answered Korko's enthusiasm with his own. Implementation of Master Fastgrade's theorized mechanism was difficult, but at last I managed to make it work. The result is an ingenious construction, one of the most sophisticated mechanical products in all of Arcavia. Korko turned the pistol to observe it from all sides, light playing off the polished barrel. "So it works. You tried it out?" Although he replied with another nod, Egidius didn't seem fully content with his creation. "I still maintain that the barrel should be made slimmer. At such a large caliber, the weapon requires an enormous amount of powder for a firearm. With all the heat and kick, the barrel will not withstand more than a single shot." "It works though, right?" Korko insisted. Instead of answering the prince's question, Egidius frowned and complained away. "I believe that the limitations lie in the material used. Further, the will needs to be fine-tuned for the pyrite will be worn down very fast. I understand that this would not be a factor otherwise, as the weapon will only be able to fire the once, but it is a bad omen to leave work unfinished like this." While Korko and Egidius were talking past each other, Dedrick had picked up one of the guns to do his own inspection with. "So the thing can only fire once then. No wonder you bought 6 of them. Still kind of a waste though." Corco's eyes blinked through a bout of uncomfortable silence as he stared at Dedrick, before the prince realized what the mercenary had meant. Oh, the guns aren't all for me, and they're not meant for regular combat either. They're life insurance, a way to punch through even the thickest armor in the world from close range, if it ever comes to that. I only get one insurance though, what with me only having one life and all. The others are for the rest of us, for all the fast-grade merchants. Here, take yours. With a beaming smile, the prince held the wheel lock at the barrel and pointed the grip towards his long-time employee. However, the fake knight made no attempt to take his weapon. Look, I'm just a hired sword, boss. I'm in it for the cash, same as my men. I think you better keep that thing for yourself. From what the others tell me about your family, it seems like you'll need it more than me anyways. In that case, I will just hold on to it for now. Disappointed by the mercenary's lack of camaraderie, Corco lowered the gun. His enthusiasm sapped away, he turned back to the pistol's creator, who still stood by on the balls of his feet, an eager look burned onto his face. Awkward at the craftsman's strange figure, Corco rubbed the back of his head. Okay, thank you, that would be all I guess. You can stay around and watch us leave if you want, I'm sure the disappearing fleet will be very dramatic. Leave? The clockmaker looked just as confused as Corco had. Why would I go anywhere? Ha! Did Master Fastgrade not look for craftsmen willing to follow on his journey into the unknown, mysterious West? There were rumors I heard, and I thought. Wait, sure, we've been hiring people to come with us, but that's mostly craftsmen who couldn't settle down elsewhere. Not that I'd want to stop you, but with your talent, wouldn't you much rather work for some well-known lord instead? Master Fastgrade is a royal prince, correct? With a dull face, Corco returned a mechanical nod. In that case, I can now count myself in the employ of royalty, that is lord enough for me. Somehow, I believe that sire will need a man of my talents, and that he will appreciate them far more than the Arcavian lords ever would. Satisfied with his own conclusion, the clockmaker nodded to himself and left the baffled prince behind, to make his way towards the ships docked at the pier. As he watched the strange craftsman join the rest of his men, Corco regained the smile he had lost. Talent follows talent. Success breeds success. Truth begets truth. Soon, all three would spread across his empire. Chapter 34, A Triumphant Return. You are listening at novelfull.audio. No one's coming, boss. Despite his warrior's shout, Corco remained motionless, his arms still rested on the railing of their ship. With a sigh, he stared at the worn-down letter in his hands, the one he had received some 6 months ago. His father, Emperor Tita Pluritak of the Medalla Empire, was dead. That's what the letter's mysterious author had told him. Although Corco had planned his return from overseas long ago, it wasn't supposed to be like this. In truth, he had wanted to show off, to take all those achievements from the past 7 years and throw them into the old man's face. Even though he knew that it was petty, and that he had better things to do, the prince still wanted to show the emperor that he had been wrong. Corco realized that he was being unfair to a father who had always tried his best. That he had far more important, far grander goals to accomplish back home. Still, he could not shake off the notion that his perfect return had been ruined. The blemish made him uneasy about things to come. Lackeys. The warrior's second call ripped Corco out of his thoughts. At last he looked up from the letter and focused on the dilapidated little harbor they had moored to. After a few seconds, his gaze went back up, to the man who had tried to gain his attention. A high head on top of wide shoulders, an honest-looking, rectangular face and arms like logs. His companion looked like the personification of the dim, gentle giant stereotype. No one's coming, the tall man repeated. It isn't, boss. You should use Lord, or Master maybe. And no more nicknames, Fidelio. Etiquette didn't matter until now, but a warrior who talks to his lord without respect will always find some old bats ready to impeach him. I'd rather not see you lose your head over a name. Master Corco, no one is coming. His eyes once again focused on the picturesque fishing village before him. Corco nodded his head. Yeah, seems like the local lord wants to prepare fully before he welcomes us home. Master Corco, the messenger we've sent hasn't been back yet. To do it right, you know. With all honors. Master Corco, it has been 3 hours, Fidelio's tense voice urged. A deep sigh escaped Corco's throat. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't just joke reality away. You and Atao should go prepare the landing then. And show some energy. It's our first steps into our great empire. Gotta look good. Corco's eyes followed Fidelio as he put down the visor of his heavy plate armor and walked down the plank. In his march, he was accompanied by another figure, smaller in stature but also dressed in the distinct armor of the foreign knights of Arcavia. As further reinforcements, 6 mercenaries in chain mail and leather followed along. Once more on solid ground, the men lined up in 2 rows of honor and raised the banner of Medella's imperial family. A silver triquetra on blue. His entrance prepared, Corco finally strode onto his homeland once more. His head raised in majesty, the king observed his ancestral lands, the ones he would soon come to rule himself, just like his father had done. With great care, the crown prince took in the run-down wooden pier they had landed on, the old familiar row of oblong wooden houses on stilts and, in the distance, the old cobbled castle atop Ciro's hill. While the prince was focused on the lord's manor in the distance, some fishermen to the side had interrupted their work on the nets, instead deciding to stare at the spectacle before them with skeptical looks. Under a barrage of obscene curses, a dog ran away with the lunch it had taken from a beggar, just as the man had been distracted by the landing party. The wind blew cold. No one else noticed the return of the crown prince and rightful heir to the Medalla Empire. The populace seems unimpressed, Prince Corco, the shorter of the 2 knights chimed in. They are clearly awed into silence, answered the mercenary's employer, unperturbed. Dedrick, you stay behind and secure the area around the ships or a landing. Fidelio follows me. We're going shopping. Shopping, master, the man-mountain asked with a dull face. Corco looked down the straight main road, towards the inner city gate which waited at its end and signified an insurmountable gap for most people on the other side. That we're headed towards the castle. Let's survey the town. After Corco and his company had left behind the dreary shantytown which surrounded the harbor, the town of Porcero began to present a somewhat livelier look. Underneath the overhangs of the plain wood houses and throughout the cobbled main road, a young boy chased after his friends in play. They passed by the strange visitors without taking notice. A few houses down, a fisherman from the harbor tried to sell his wares to a businessman. Despite the simple green wool robes worn by the potential buyer, he was a very rich man, as evidenced by the restaurant which formed the backdrop for their haggling. All windows of the airy 3-story stone construction were covered with paper, a sign that the owner didn't mind splurging wherever he could. Up above, the construction was topped off with one of the rounded roofs which had been so familiar to Corco in his youth. Further along, a young, stout woman was leading her servant into the chaotic side roads and towards the common market near the harbor. Unlike the previous merchant, her own wealth and status could be seen right away from her solid silver necklace and the thick silk cord around her white, flowing dress. Despite the size of their armed group, dressed in the armors, pants and vests of the East, none of the townsfolk showed any special reaction towards Corco. However, all of these familiar sights and sounds evoked so much feeling inside the prince, so much longing he hadn't been aware of that he failed to even notice. Only when he found something incongruous with the familiar picture did he regain his senses. In the front yard of a tea house, 2 old scholars with long, neat beards and white robes played a board game, while their young disciple observed from the side. Who dares? No matter how unusual the scholars were in a town like Porcero, the strange new faces only held Korko's interest for a moment, before a shout demanded all the attention for itself. Once the call was followed by the sound of shuffling feet and clangs of metal, the prince turned away from the chess players, over to his own men. Over there, a warrior in full armament had fallen victim to Fidelio's strength. The young man wore lamellar armor over a long, red tunic with an axe and small shield by his side, typical for a member of his social class. Held to the ground by Fidelio's ludicrous strength, the youngster still flailed about, his long, tied hair and silver earrings dancing in the dirty street. Although Korko was about to have the warrior released, not interested in what sort of minor issue had caused the fight, the warrior was very much up to the fight. Unhand me barbarian! Or feel the wrath of House Petrosilius. Despite his best efforts, the young warrior in red failed to get back up off the ground. After all, how could a simple warrior stand up to Fidelio, the son of a great general? For heaven's sake, don't rough up our people 5 minutes off the boat. Please let him go. Determined to make a good first impression on his people, Korko jumped in to save the warrior. Now that he looked at him, the warrior seemed more like a kid, certainly not a fully grown man. Meanwhile, the child soldier himself seemed baffled at Korko's words. Yakua. Who are you? Of course the warrior wouldn't understand how a group who looked so much like outsiders could speak his own language so well, so Korko returned a nod, before he began to play with the silver emblem around his neck. Look closely, friend, and see the truth. At last the warrior's eyes went first towards Korko's face, and then down, to the prince's pendant. That's the triquetra. You are. My name is Crown Prince Korkapeka Tita and I have come home to lead our people onto the path to glory. Self-satisfied, Korko could finally release the words which had been stuck on the tip of his tongue since he left that boat. However, after all the indifference from before, the prince was still shocked by the warrior's sudden enthusiasm. Prince Korko, if it truly is your honorable self who has returned from exile, then there may be hope yet. But the matters in Medalla are not as Prince would suspect. Prince Korko has been declared dead just weeks ago and House Pluritak has begun to gift away the achievements of our ancestors to foreign barbarians. Not dissimilar to the men in Prince's company, the young man finished with a suspicious look towards Korko's guard. However, the prince himself had no time to worry about the warrior's slight, so he preempted their outrage with his own. Dead. Wait. Korko squinted his eyes and intently stared at nothing, while he tried to make sense of the new information. Progress was slow. Prince, the warrior tried again. Wait. I don't understand a word. I'm quite sure that my departure was framed as a trip to study abroad, at least officially. I haven't been exiled, pretty much ever. Not only was I never exiled, I am also very much alive, at least as far as I can tell. And how exactly could my family give away what they don't own? Can you just change the laws if you're shameless enough? There is a limit to shamelessness, right? What the fuck is going on here? Prince Korko, it may be unwise to speak here. However, as you are the rightful heir to the silver crown, it would be this young master's honor to invite Prince to the Petrosilius estate inside Porcero. Primus Vitus Petrosilius apologizes for his late greeting. Any questions Prince Korko may have should wait until then. After his abrupt introduction, Primus gave a short sideways glance to the scholars or their board game, before he marched off in the opposite direction of his original route, back towards the castle. Meanwhile, Korko was too busy with his own thoughts to acknowledge the young master of the noble house Petrosilius any further. There was much information to chew through, and many things to reconsider. Master, what shall we do? In response to Fidelio's question, Korko gave the still unfazed scholars a closer inspection. Even though all the passers-by who had previously ignored Korko's group had halted and began to stare, now aware of their identity, the scholars still seemed deeply immersed in their game. Unnatural, considering all the excitement the front of their little play area had just witnessed. However, unlike his elders, their young apprentice gave a nervous glance before he hastily zeroed in on the board as well. Back in the capital, 7 years ago, the Crown Prince had seen the scholars, men devoted to spread the knowledge and culture of the Western Chukwa Empire. Though 7 years ago, these scholars would never have gone to a far-off place like Porcero. "Let's continue to the castle for now," the prince said after his stare had failed to bear any fruit. "We should collect our own information first, and I don't want to stand here until a crowd forms. Also, we should show our banners by now." I wanted to avoid noise at first, but avoiding conflict seems more important. I aim to be a king of peace, after all. "Yes, Master Corco." After they had left earshot of the board game, Corco moved close to Fidelio, looked up and asked, "So who exactly are House Petrocilius?" "They're just a small family, Master. At least that's how it used to be 7 years ago. They own a few vineyards along the eastern hills, but much of their land has poor fertility. They are a typical eastern estate." "So that makes them what?" "Backwards and conservative. They seemed more than willing to work with a dead exile, so something weird is going on. Someone in the capital might be working on reforms. Which is odd, considering the empire has no ruler right now. So who does the reforming then? Nothing makes sense somehow. We need more info. Oh, also, vineyards. That's oddly convenient." "It is, Master," Fidelio replied with a sly grin. As they talked, their group closed in on the sloped wall of irregular stones which separated the noble quarters from the rest of the city. "I guess we'll soon find out what stance Lord Salina of Porcero has on this reform/dead prince issue," Corco muttered as he looked ahead towards the heavy wooden gate which would lead them inside the wall and towards the owner of the city. "Halt!" Upon further approach, one of the gate's guards stepped forward, his spear at the ready. The aggressive action sparked an equal and opposite reaction from Fidelio. "Do you not see the banners of House Pluritac, you idiot? Remove your weapon and move aside." The guard retorted by holding the party at spear point instead, sneer included. "I see only the colors of a dead man, carried by an outsider. Clearly you are impostors. Lay down your arm and surrender, before things get ugly for you." Armed with his supreme confidence, Corco sized up the opposition. A smile slowly formed on his lips as inside his head, a plan formed to get him all the information he needed. Some ruckus would be enough to bring out the local lord, or his goons. At that point, Corco could simply ask him. "Fidelio." "Yes, Master Corco." "Go make a path." "With pleasure, Master Corco." Fidelio mimicked the grin of his master as he slowly moved his enormous, iron-clad mass towards the opposition. "Stop or prepare to offend Governor Salina. You entire lot will lose your heads." A second guard in the back shouted in a self-assured manner as he took half a step towards his hapless companion to act as reinforcements, moral and otherwise. While Fidelio brought down the visor of his helmet, ready to charge, Corco replied in a cool voice. "Seems like that's my problem, so I'll decline the advice, thank you. We'll deal with the governor ourselves, if it comes to that." In reaction to his master's word, Fidelio ran ahead. Lost in a blur of motion, the warrior closed the distance between himself and the first loud-mouth guard, propelled by his superhuman strength. Wide-eyed, the guard could only watch as the cultivator sidestepped the threatening spear point with an ease no normal man of his weight and armor could muster. Now that the warrior had reached the flank of the still shocked-frozen guard, he grabbed his opponent's forearms and swung him around like a child. One rotation, and another, until, with a violent shout, Fidelio released the helpless guard towards the wall he was sworn to protect. With a loud clatter and an uncomfortable crunch, the guard smashed against the hard stone surface. When his leg first made contact, an inhuman shriek escaped his throat and filled the streets. Bent in an unnatural angle, the guard cowered over his leg, in a subconscious effort to protect it, a gut-wrenching view. "I yield." Before they had shown their resolve, the second guard had pretended confidence, but now his weapon dropped and was replaced by a film of sweat on the man's palms and forehead. In the meantime, 2 more guards had moved around the corner and now stopped to look on in shock as a giant, iron-plated monster ran towards their companion. The beast grabbed onto the man's face and smashed his head into the open gate with a disturbing, visceral crunch. Dazed, unconscious or dead, the guard slid down the gate to reveal a bloody dent in the wood behind him. Now that Fidelio had finished his work, he opened his visor and spat on the ground in contempt. He spared no glance to the remaining guards as he proceeded through the gateway. In response, the reinforcements could not even muster a single word of protest as they shuffled to the side to make way. Within moments, the screams of Fidelio's first victim had been reduced to a whimper. God damn it, always overdoing things. Flustered by his servant's extreme actions, Corco hastened towards the scene and kneeled down next to the guard by the gate. Head injuries were usually the most dangerous, so the man with the broken leg could wait. Hey, can you talk? How many fingers am I holding up? What? The guard blinked a few times, his eyes unfocused. At least he was still alive and conscious. Corco tried to keep his calm as he waved his hand in front of the guard's face. How many fingers? At last the eyes in Corco's front cleared, and the man reacted to the silly question with a frown. Point 3. Satisfied with the response, Corco got up and faced the other guards, the 2 who had huddled together and stared at his bizarre actions in fear. Though the crown prince hadn't planned their entry to become this violent, he pretended to be calm. No matter what, his plan was still on course, somewhat. Well, at least he's conscious and his vision seems fine. You, nameless minions. Make sure to properly bandage his head to stop the bleeding. And don't move him around too much. Go easy on him for a bit, he is probably concussed. After he had done his due to help the man and ease his own conscience, Corco walked through the gate after Fidelio, followed by the rest of his guard. For a moment he thought, before he turned again. And for goodness sake, he added towards the guards, just make way next time. I don't know what the governor pays you, but it's probably not worth getting killed over. While he walked off towards the waiting Fidelio, the prince whispered to the mercenary next to him. Go back to the ship and tell Atau to get ready for landing. Just in case we don't make it back by dusk. Yes, sire. The man replied with a stern face and a loose salute before he rushed off, back through the gate and towards the harbor. Meanwhile, Corco was busy complaining to Fidelio. You don't think you overdid it? You could have killed someone. I hate cowards who feign strength yet hide behind someone bigger. Those small-time crooks deserved everything they got. Besides, I properly held back. Didn't kill anyone. Even though he had always honored the warrior code of Medalla more than even his own life, Fidelio's actions still seemed extreme. Maybe Corco's attendant was even more upset about their lousy reception than he himself. At least the harsh entry serves our purpose. We really should get dressed for the next act though. People keep treating me like an outsider and it's starting to piss me off. Rather than chide his warrior, Corco used his talent for changing the subject to avoid an awkward and pointless debate on ethics. Instead, he moved towards one of the shops built along the very edge of the inner wall, to hunt for a new outfit. Behind him, the wails of the warriors had disappeared already. Their great return had only just begun. Chapter 35 Blue for the funeral. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Unlike Porcero's outer city with its chaotic layout off the wide main roads, the inner city was neatly divided into blocks through and through. The buildings themselves were uniform, if somewhat lacking in care. Throughout the years, the neat white plaster of the walls had turned yellow and developed spots and holes, revealing the raw stone underneath. Like all the housing built along the inner wall, there was only a single floor. After all, the wall itself served as one of the 4 sides of the building. Wares produced on the outside would be transported directly through the common border between the two, since the commoners of the outside had no right to enter the inner city. yet the nobles inside still demanded the luxuries produced by ordinary craftsmen. Corco entered the shop through the open wood and paper frame door, accompanied by the soft sound of a chime swinging in the wind. Since the building was low in height, it had to be built wide to accommodate all the desires of the rich. Thus, its inside was as spacious as Corco had expected. All throughout the establishment, the walls were lined with carpets made of expensive cloth, to show off the shop's assortment, while several enormous bronze mirrors broke the room up into sections. Installed along the back wall one could find large wooden rolls loaded with merchandise. Finally, the nominal shopkeeper, a chubby middle-aged man in a red tunic, could be found on a chair towards the side. Too busy with his afternoon nap, he failed to notice his new guests. "Good morning, friend." Corco gave an energetic greeting to help the man out in his work. "Ha, wah." While the flustered clerk gathered himself and then waddled over, Corco patiently waited at the entrance. "Valued guest, I humbly implore you to ignore the tardiness. This servant will provide to the best of his abilities." His senses finally with him, the clerk started to bow and apologize profusely. "Can you stop the groveling? You are not my servant, so why would I care what you do? If you have to, make up for your mistake by showing me around properly. I need some quality cloth." Corco really wasn't comfortable with the deferential attitude those of lower status would show in this country, so his answer turned out much more brusque than he had hoped. Rather than attempt to fix his country's entire culture, he decided to focus on the more immediate tasks instead. Getting some new clothes. "Of course, valued guest. This way." On hurried steps the clerk led Corco and his men towards the far end of the establishment, back to the wooden scrolls which seemed to contain the shop's best pieces of work. "Please take a look, valued guest. Pure chutwa silk. Gold and white are very popular colors at the moment, especially with valued guests from afar like yourself. I am sure it will be to valued guests' great satisfaction." He pointed towards a particular scroll of amber cloth on which complex, geometrical patterns in white were outlined by thin, black thread. "What did you mean by that? Popular with guests from afar. Is Porcero receiving foreign trade? I'm not a valued guest from afar, by the way, I'm a Yaku, just like you." Once again Corco had stumbled onto a strange difference from before. When he had left 7 years ago, his father had been very keen to limit trade with the foreigners from Arcavia to a necessary minimum, yet no one here seemed surprised at Corco's Arcavian clothing. Foreign dignitaries have been coming and going through Porcero for quite some time. They are valued customers. Since young master was dressed in their manner, this servant made undue assumptions. "Please excuse this servant's rudeness, young master." "It's fine, please just stop apologizing." Even though he wasn't a young master either, Corco would rather not correct the man anymore. Instead, he pointed at the gaudy amber silk and asked, "Is that all you have? Maybe something less tacky? Is young master not satisfied with our gold cloth? These days, it is even worn amongst the nobility in the capital. Really, white and gold. What happened to our traditional colors?" As soon as he said the words and saw the clerk's uncomfortable look, he understood that he had asked the wrong guy. Thus, he focused on his purchase once again. "You don't have anything traditional. How about some blue robes? Show me a wave pattern maybe. It's for a funeral after all." "Of course, young master. Right over here young master. A rolling wave pattern in dark blue and emerald colors. Would this be to young master's liking?" As if to answer the clerk's question, Corco rolled out some of the cloth and held it to his chest as he observed himself in a nearby mirror. For the future ruler of Medalla, he looked remarkably unimpressive. His height was short for a member of the nobility, many of whom were abnormally tall, and his physique and face seemed quite stocky. If nothing else, the extra fat around his cheeks made him seem friendly and approachable, at least that was what he wanted to believe. His shoulder-length brown hair distinguished him from many of the black-haired lords on the northern peninsula of Yaqualpa, as did his dark skin, which against common practice he had not powdered to appear more white. Never again would he hide his true nature to fit in anywhere, not now that he had the power to ignore the archaic customs of others. "This seems nice," Corco said in reaction to the cloth. "Give me enough length for a tunic." "Oh, do you also do tailoring here?" "I've just come back and don't exactly have a tailor with me." "Not here, but I can help young master contact one of the workers outside." "Good, then get me that blue-gray cloth over there and make a robe to go over the tunic. And make it nice and thick. It's still winter after all." "Of course, young master." This servant will have to take measure for the initial cut of the robe. Thus young master will have to excuse this servant's forward request, but young master will have to remove the vest. Tomorrow, young master may go visit the tailor in person, for the final fitting. "Sure, that's fine. Make it a traditional cut please. And give me a good few pockets. Oh, I'll need a headband as well. Something simple." Nonchalantly Corco gave his list of demands while he took off his vest for measurements. Underneath, he revealed a thin silk undershirt and the heavy chain-mail armor he always carried on his back, the true cause of his stocky physique. Even though his torso was still covered, his arms, toned from years of training, were revealed, together with the tattoos of abstract, blocky patterns which covered both arms over their entire length. That's. As realization turned to shock and then to horror, Clerk stared at the ink, unblinking. "It might be better if young master leaves now." "Since when are Sasha markings a problem?" Corco answered in confusion, his look moving down to the traditional patterns of southern Medalla on his arm. "Please do not make life impossible for this servant, young master." The clerk reverted back to his natural state and resumed his groveling. While he cowered into a pose of submission under a barrage of apologies, Fidelio finally lost the temper he had been holding on to for a while already. "Enough. Not only do you insult my lord by calling him a mere young master, now a lowly servant even denies service. What good are you exactly?" In large, imposing steps, the intimidating warrior closed in, but the servant still wouldn't budge. "No, please. I could become an outcast." "Good, then right now you have the choice between possible exile eventually and certain death right now. Choose." Anger flared, Fidelio drew the heavy axe at his hip. "No, Lord, forgive me. On your feet." "Why? Yes, of course. Take the measurement." "You understood." His life threatened, the clerk followed the warrior's commands. Finally his shaky hands went to work on Corco's measurement. With more force than necessary, Fidelio put his axe back into its designated sling on his waist. "Honestly, why does this have to be so hard? Every step in this damn town is one giant struggle." You. While the warrior was still grumbling about the last delay, the clerk already had the next one in store. Wide-eyed, the warrior stared back. "Is there something else?" Corco chimed in before his attendant could kill the clerk out of sheer annoyance. "Lord will have to remove the armor. It's fine like this. I'll wear it under the tunic anyways." "Good, then that's." As the servant moved towards Corco, Fidelio closed in as well to prevent any incidents. Corco knew that the warrior wouldn't allow anything to go wrong, not now that they had finally made it back home. And finally one elbow and 2 hands at the shoulder. That should be enough for an initial tailoring. "I hope Lord is satisfied." "Thanks." An immovable smile on his face, Corco looked at the servant for a good few seconds, before, without warning, the prince slapped his opposite's cheeks as hard as he could. With the cultivator's full weight behind the hit, the clerk was sent reeling backwards and down onto his knees. "Why, Lord, I..." Confused and stammering, he tried to grasp the situation. Corco grinned in response. Now you can say to your lord that you were forced to serve me. I doubt anyone will make you responsible for this after you've had your life threatened and got beat up. That's enough excuse to get you off the hook. Thank you, Lord. Although his voice was still strained, and the servant had his head lowered once again, Korko still decided that he could hear the true, honest gratitude hidden in the answer. While the prince was still lost in self-satisfaction over his quick-thinking solution, a loud voice rang from outside the door to ruin his fun. Impostor who besmirched the glorious name of Pluritac. Leave the building and face your justice. And right on cue. Let's get some proper answers. Fidelio, we're going, Korko said as he moved towards the door. King of Peace, was it? Shush. And so the warrior and the 3 remaining mercenaries followed their master's steps, towards the army waiting for them outside. Back out in the sunlight, Korko was stunned. He had predicted opposition, but owing to his status, and the sudden nature of his arrival, he had not expected the outright hostility on show at that moment. To welcome the arrival of their nominal new emperor, the army of Syros had prepared itself in impressive fashion. In front of the shop's entrance, a company of soldiers formed a wall 8 layers deep. The soldiers were easy to identify as regular troops, since they were all equipped with leather or wooden armor of various styles and conditions over short, predominantly red-patterned tunics. In addition, they were armed with long spears or axes and had small shields fastened to their arms. Ideal equipment to suppress and overwhelm smaller elite forces. Some of them, possibly the favorites of the Lord of Porcero, even wore simple, open-faced helmets on their heads. Stationed on the wall and roof behind them, Korko found another troop, armed with bows and dressed much more frugally, with only a simple tunic and girdle to protect them from the cold. Most striking within the formation, however, was the smug-looking man to the left of the main square. His polished iron armor and helmet glittered in the sun as much as his silk tunic did underneath the metal. Pride infused in his every move, he held up his shiny sword weighed down by precious metals and even more precious stones. For but a moment the shiny warrior paused, before he began his carefully prepared speech. On command of the great Quintus Apiliotis Saliena, Lord of Porcero. I, Latris D. Saliena, equipped with courage, wit and righteousness, have deemed this criminal to have committed the following heinous acts. The first offense, impersonating a member of the royal family. The second offense, a heinous, deadly attack on the noble guards of Porcero. Bit by bit, Korko tightened his fists, while a shadow sank over his face. What other tricks would he have to put up with during his return? Was his family really dead set on seeing him in the grave? Meanwhile, the shiny guard blabbered on, oblivious to the crown prince's wrath. Reliant on the word of the honest guards of Porcero and on my own wisdom, I have thus concluded the guilt of the criminal, as is within my power. As such, the unknown impostor and his gang will. Are you sure you want to finish that sentence? Interrupted by the low and angry growl of the accused, the warrior halted in his steps, as a frown took form on his face. Silence, impostor. The Lord's judgment shall not be interrupted, the warrior bellowed in response. Korko ignored the warning, took a step forward and raised his voice even further, his gaze a raging inferno. Because if you finish that sentence, I can guarantee your death. Empty threats, impostor. The mighty force of Porcero is behind me. You have no chance. What answered the warrior's insistence was a sneer from the prince, a grim look of derision. Right. But I don't have my people only here. Since you know I'm here, you should also know about the 3 ships in your harbor. Now let's just say that on one of those, there is another member of my family, someone trustworthy who could identify me before the elders of the ancestral hall back in Arguna. And let's say that this someone also holds my family seal, to get easy access into the ancestral hall. And let's assume that this person in the harbor would hear about my untimely demise and would thus leave the port to sail south. Still following along so far? Good. Now, let's assume that the person, let's just pick a random name and call him Atao Sanko Sakarta for now, would talk about what happened here today, before the elders of the ancestral hall in Arguna. Throughout Korko's speech, the shiny sword of the shiny warrior dipped lower and lower, as the color drained from the man's face. By the end, his look of arrogance had turned to horror. In a complete reversal, Korko's face of anger had smoothed out into complacency. This would be easier than he had thought. Now at that point in the story, everyone would know that you, a lowly warrior, killed the crown prince of Medalla in the street. Like a dog. While you denied him his birthright. You want to say you didn't. That option is long gone. In your smugness, you've screamed so loudly that everyone inside these walls must have heard you. By tonight, all the eastern estates will know of this. I mean, just look over there. With a point of his finger, Korko made the warrior aware of the second source of his confidence, besides his own status as crown prince. On a corner further into the inner city stood Primus Vitus Petrosilius, the young master who had invited Korko to his family residence earlier. Unlike before, his warrior clothes had been exchanged with an expensive robe fit for the highest nobility. Without any words and without any further actions, the young noble simply stood there and acted as witness. Now that his point had been made, Korko continued, over the stunned silence of the crowd. Not only you will die, your entire family will be wiped out. Gone, down to the last child. Maybe, if you're lucky, they'll keep some of the prettier girls around as concubines, but without a family as backing they'll basically be slaves either way. In fact, any man in this formation could face the same, everyone with a weapon aimed at the crown prince. As for your lord, do you really think he'll get himself into trouble just to save you? Why do you think he sent you, a lowly warrior, instead of coming here himself? You know what he'll say once Arguna complains about my assassination. I knew of nothing. It was my overzealous servant who committed this terrible crime. I will punish him myself. As the full gravity of his position began to hit home, the warrior turned as white as the newest fashion trend in the capital. Your lord used you. Sacrificed you and everyone here, just so he could kill me off with clean hands. You want to carry that burden for him, really. That's why I will advise you again. Be careful with your next words. They could be your last. Once the paleness had been fully developed, the warrior started to frown instead. Deep in thought he weighed his next step. The air became heavy and breathing difficult, as if a blanket of thick smog had fallen over the shop's front. Someone behind Korko swallowed audibly while everyone awaited the warrior's judgment, one which could pronounce a death sentence for every man in the street. Thus, the criminals will be brought to Ciro's castle to be tried for their crimes. Take them away. And so, with the smug feeling of having aced the test everyone else had failed, the rightful new emperor of Medalla was taken into custody for impersonating himself. Underscore 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 bored out of his mind. Atau sat in his captain's quarters and looked towards the heavy armor in the corner of his cabin. He really didn't understand how Fidelio could stand the thing. Crammed and uncomfortable were the most flattering words he could find to describe it. Maybe he had just spent too much time at sea, but all he could ever think of when he wore Arcavian knight armor was, what if I fall into the water now? He would rather not deal with the claustrophobic feeling again. Thus, his view left the cause of his dismay and went out of his cabin's open window instead. His eyes swept over the lagoon which formed the natural harbor Porcero was built on, as well as towards the hills that blocked the sight to the north. With fondness he thought back to the chaotic 7 years of travel since he had left his homeland from this very place, to the uncertainty, the hardship, the failure, the struggle, the eventual success. And the dreams, of course. At some point 5 years ago, his cousin had dreamed maybe greater than any man had ever dared to dream. And he had infected his inner circle with the same illness, Atau chief among them. Time to make the dream reality. It starts here, the captain muttered to himself. Suddenly, through the window Atao spotted a familiar silhouette sprinting towards the pier. Alarmed, he stormed out of his cabin while he bellowed his orders with practiced ease. All men on their feet. Lower the plank. There's news from cousin. After an unsteady rush up to the deck, the mercenary Corco had since started to explain his troubles, all the while trying to catch his breath. It didn't go very well. Captain Atao, there's trouble, sir. Atao furrowed his brows at the man's lack of discipline. Slow down. Breathe. Then speak clearly. What is wrong with you, man? After a few deep breaths, the mercenary transmitted his employer's message with a worried face, but Atao just grinned in response. Who says that's trouble? We may well get the perfect chance to sack this damn town. At least we'll fleece the bastards. With verve, the captain turned around towards his crew. Blow for reinforcements, men, there's work to be done. Under great shouts of hurrah from the crew, one of the sailors his way to a horn at the ship's bow and released a deep sound from within the instrument. A short while later, under the widening grin of the captain, the rest of their fleet appeared from behind the northern hills. Whatever their enemies thought about their strength, they would be sorely mistaken. Chapter 36 Unequal Negotiations. You're listening at novelfull.audio. The room certainly doesn't look like a prison. Those were the first words which popped into the Crown Prince's mind after the heavy oaken door had been slammed shut behind him. To the sound of scraping metal on metal from the other side of the gate, he observed his new cell. Dry, clean walls covered in plaster, clean wooden floor, an elevated bed. He even had a chair. Although the furnishing might be considered Spartan by most standards, Corco was relieved. To put him in a room like this meant that his captors were treating him like a noble, so they should not be stupid enough to just kill him and damn the consequences. Relieved, Corco placed the chair opposite the bed. After he had taken a seat on the ladder, he waited for his jailer to arrive. After a good while of boredom, the prince once again heard the metal bolts movement. Finally, he found the source of information he had been looking for since his landing. With a confident gait, a well-dressed man followed the swinging door into the room. He had a height of almost 2 meters, wore a yellow and red patterned silk tunic and was bedecked with rings, gauntlets and earrings in silver and gold all over. Used to the feeling of superiority, the man's calm eyes looked down on Corco in a self-assured manner. While the gray streaks in his long black hair were proof of his age, his straight posture and elegant demeanor belied any impact the years might have had on his physique, just like they belied any dishonorable thoughts Corco's captor might have ever had. For a while, prisoner and jailer, quietly measuring their opposite. Finally, the first to open his mouth was the prisoner. How nice of you to join me. Please have a seat. As he moved towards the already prepared chair, Corco's captor said. Prince Corco, allow me to introduce myself. I am Quintus Apiliotis Saliena, Lord of the Syros Estate and Governor of the East. We've met 7 years ago. I'm not surprised you don't remember. After all, who would waste his thoughts on a dead man? Despite Corco's harsh accusations, the captor didn't even twitch as he sat down on his chair. I am very glad Prince is healthy. I hope my overzealous servant did no harm. Corco suppressed a small smile. After all, this was the exact same excuse he had predicted. You're a smart man, leaving your goons outside. After a good few seconds of silence, Corco answered. Goons. For the first time today, Lord Saliena raised his brows, surprised by the unfamiliar term. Your men. I simply wanted Prince to feel safe, a smile came back. True. Though this way, you can also make sure that nothing we say is overheard by anyone. So how about we cut the nonsense about overzealous servants and best intentions and whatever else you've got prepared and start talking straight instead? For a while longer, Corco observed his opposite, until he had made sure that he hadn't offended the Lord with his little outburst. Only then did he continue. So what's going on here? I'm dead, supposedly, just like the emperor. Meanwhile, with no ruler on the throne, someone is still making new laws in Arguna. What is happening in the capital and what happened to my father? Haha, of course Prince would not understand after being away for so long. Selina leaned back in his chair. As is customary, the elders of the ancestral hall will soon announce their nomination for the next emperor. The royal family has already called a noble assembly in the capital, to confirm their nomination. Unfortunately, I had to send my son to represent the Siro's estate and House Selina, as I still had business to attend to here. Prince should have noticed by now, since the business involves Prince himself. As for your father. Lips curled and raised, Selina made no secret of his contempt. The emperor suddenly and mysteriously died 2 seasons ago. While concrete details would not reach this far from the capital, the rumors of an illness and natural death are clear nonsense. No man with that many enemies dies a natural death. Especially enemies so close to him. In response, Korko's eyes turned sharp as knives. You should be careful with what you say, or today you'll make another enemy yourself. I dare you to insult my family again. Despite Korko's best attempt at strength, his threat simply pearled off the accused perfect smile. I apologize for my rudeness, Prince Korko. Truly. However, I remember Prince as a smart man. None of these insinuations should ring untrue. Without a doubt, Selina implied an involvement of the royal family in the emperor's death. However, Korko wouldn't even consider a thought this monstrous. No matter how cheap some members of his family were, they were still his own blood after all. Nonsense. Who would it be? I know Spuria is kind of a bitch, but she begged her own father to become father's second wife. There's no way she'd kill her husband after having 3 of his kids. In return, the Lord of Siros only offered a mysterious smile, so Korko decided to dig further. It was either that or a swift slap in the face. For now, talking seemed like the safer option. So what exactly was your plan here? Kill me to make sure I don't reach the capital and get nominated by the elders. Are you trying to imply that Spuria has you in her pocket? Or maybe it's my good brother Amautu, huh? That one was always pretty full of himself. Finally, the jailer showed a reaction to his prisoner's probe. Angered, he narrowed his eyes just the smallest amount. Even so, his face had returned to normal moments later, before his answer had even begun. The Lord of Siros is in no one's pocket, boy. And why would I be? There is ample reason for me to hold you here. It is in my own family's interests, after all. No, instead, you should worry about your own family's integrity. The outsiders from the east and the west have come and talked to your brothers. Not only have they spoken, they have also brought ample gifts. Prince Amautu now supports the Western Chutwa Empire and your Prince Pakakutek supports the Eastern Barbarians of Arcavia. They are the ones fighting for the throne. And I know quite a few of the Eastern houses hate the outsiders, or any change, with a passion, but House Selina, and the governor of the East, think farther. Out of nowhere, the governor stood up and walked over to the tiny window in Korko's cell. Just look at Porcero, the former Pearl of the East. After years of nothing but tradition and honor we have been reduced to a run-down fishing village, nothing more. The supposed center of the Eastern Kingdom, and yet the mansions in the inner city stand abandoned by the noble houses which used to call them their homes. Once one of your brothers takes the silver crown, any of them, really, all those outsiders will want to do trade through Medalla. Whether that is Chutwa to Arcavia or the other way round will not matter. They will all come here, the greatest port of the East. And they will bring their goods and their wealth with them. Like it once was half a millennium ago, Siro's castle will once again become the center of Yaqualpa, and House Selina will return to its rightful status. And leave the country to the outsiders in return. Korko sneered. Who cares about outsiders? Our own ancestors came from the eastern lands, from Arcavia. Still calm, Selina turned back around and returned to his seat. However, Korko wouldn't let his cheap excuse go. Yeah, those ancestors came here because they were being hunted by the same fucking people you're inviting in now. It sure is convenient for you to forget that, or all that Yaku blood you and everyone else in this place has. Confronted with two taboos at once, the Lord began to shuffle in his chair, uncomfortable for the first time. Even so, Korko wasn't done yet. And unless you forget. I've been there, in Arcavia. I know the people your servants call honored guests. Once those zealots with their crazy doctrine have sunk their hooks into the empire, they'll devour it whole, and your little fishing village with it. At that point, there will be no way back. You had a nice plan going, but it won't happen. You can't kill me, not anymore. Since there were witnesses from other estates to see my arrest, everyone in this city already knows I'm in here, and soon everyone in the east will. That means you can't touch me unless you want to oppose every noble family in the empire. Confronted with Korko's claim, the Lord only smiled, calm again now that he didn't have to consider his own heritage anymore. Indeed. However, I can hold Prince Korko however long I wish for, as an honored guest of course. Once Prince Amautu or Prince Pakakutek become emperor, your status will cease to matter, as will your life. So you have it all planned out then. Korko's reply was curt, mostly out of disinterest, but Selina seemed to interpret his lack of reaction as an admission of defeat. There is no need to be in low spirits, Prince Korko. As soon as Prince set foot on Porcero's piers, there really was not much to be done. This is my land after all. Prince never had a chance, then why did you even come here to my cell, jailer? You want to show off. Simple curiosity I suppose. For example. Lord Selina reached into his long sleeve and extracted a small, metallic box. By all the stars in the sky I cannot fathom what might be the use of this utensil. Would Prince enlighten me? With a sly smile, Korko took the box from Lord Selina, amused by Selina's unintentional joke. With flourish, the prince pushed open the top of the box and placed his thumb on the revealed metallic wheel at the top. It's a lighter, Korko explained. Kerosene as fuel and a wheel lock mechanism as ignition. An upgrade on flint and steel if you will. I haven't tried selling them yet, just thought it was nice and fitting. Me bearing fire as I return home. Focused on the contraption rather than his audience, the prince pressed down his thumb to spin the wheel and open the valve. Sparks flew from the wheel's friction against the pyrite and ignited the released kerosene in an instant. Thus, a flame had started to burn between the two men. I bring with me much more than just my birthright. I have ships filled with men and materials. We have acquired knowledge and ideas far beyond your understanding. With them, we will create a paradise in these lands, like no place before and no place thereafter. As Medala becomes the center of the world, we will bring forth a golden age that will make every man, woman and child on it merry, wealthy, learned and free beyond your wildest dreams. Just for a moment, Korko paused his speech for effect. He had practiced it more than enough times when he was at sea after all. Of course that includes you, Lord Quintus Selina. What do you think? With nothing but a short puff of air, Selina put out the flame in his front. I would rather be wealthy by myself, he said in a dry voice. The thing about dreams is that they are far too easy to extinguish. I am afraid yours will end here as well, dear prince. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Yes, please enter. Korko called with a strange smile on his face, against his jailer's wishes. Under the displeased look of Lord Selina, one of the Ciro's castle guards entered the cell and, with a frightened stare at the young Prince Korko, whispered a message into his lord's ear. The more he heard, the more color drained from the lord's face, until it was as white as the snows of the southern wilderness. Enraged, Selina held his warrior's tunic and screamed in his face. You best be truthful in your words or I will have your head, servant. That can't be. Rather than wait out the fun play before him, Corco was giddy to get himself involved, so he chimed in. Of course Lord Selina would not understand after being in my room for so long. They sure took their time though. Shall we go and take a look ourselves? With a kind look on his face, Corco, the new master of the room, asked his guest to follow him out, before he walked past the guards and out of the door. No one tried to stop him. Underscore 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 underscore. As always, the view from atop the balustrade of Ciro's castle was breathtaking. That was the first thing Quintus thought as he stepped next to the young prince and looked out into the distance. Since the castle was built at the westernmost point of Porcero, from here he could see the entire town in all its former glory. Right at the foot of the castle's hilltop he could find the Porcero's large yard, built for his warriors' assembly and as a court for him to pass his noble judgment on the guilty. Beyond the castle walls Selina found the inner city, in past times the center of Eastern culture, but now home only to his own warriors and servants. These days, lords would visit their city mansions only occasionally, preferring to stay in their own estates, or in the Medallian capital of Arguna. The outer city still looked lively, but became more and more unsightly the closer one got to the water, where the rabble would congregate no matter what he did to drive them away. Of course, at this moment, the most unsightly view among the disgusting far side of Porcero were the 24 or so ships which had anchored at or, for a lack of space, near the harbor. Seeing his old and brittle city contrasted against the new and imposing fleet forced a deep sigh out of Quintus Selina. It seems this lord cannot keep you as a guest much longer, Prince Corco. I guess you thought I was bluffing with the men and materials thing. It's fine though, this should be enough to convince you. Who is to say we cannot hold out in here for several weeks? Ciro's castle has never been taken, Quintus probed. House Selina was an ancient, respected force within Medalla. He wouldn't go down without a fight and disappoint his ancestors. Here. With how run down your entire town is, how many proper warriors can you actually afford? 500. Maybe 8. And how many of those have already moved to Arguna, waiting to sell a favor to whoever ends up as the new emperor? Not to mention, we don't even need to storm this little castle of yours. No one is going to use your port if my men just go and burn the entire town to the ground. The thing's already falling apart as is. If you don't play nice, we can just help the decay along a bit. Then the trading ships of Arcavia will just have to go a bit further south and make another port town lord rich. Once again the brat dared to threaten him. In his head, Quintus was furious, but outwardly, he still kept his calm. He had learned quite early that getting emotional never helped in politics. It was the reason he could become the lord of House Selina even though he was the fifth born his generation, the reason he had beaten out competition from his 4 useless brothers. He found solace in the thought that at least when it came to self-control, Quintus was far ahead of his opponent, who seemed to get angry and happy in the blink of an eye, without any restraint. For now, however, no amount of composure would help him win this battle. For now, he would have to retreat. Then Prince and his men will have to dispense with the hospitality of House Selina. I hope we did not cause a misunderstanding, Quintus said with a smile. No rush, Prince Corco returned the smile right back, though his was much more genuine in nature. There are still things we have to discuss. How about we find somewhere to sit? And have your people bring some writing utensils too, we'll have to sign a few contracts I think. Of course. This way please. Quintus kept his smile, determined to not give in to any blackmail. No one would trample the Selina family honor like that, no matter the size of their navy. Underscore 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 underscore, that is all. For the second time in a day, Quintus was surprised. What else could I possibly want from you, Lord Selina? Corco looked at him with raised eyebrows, before he once more showed his harmless smile. Still, a plot of land in Porcero. Is that all? Once more he repeated his question, in the hopes that the prince would explain his strange request further. At least in this matter, Prince Corco met Selina's expectations. I'll even pay you for it. I believe that there can only be peace if there is mutual interest and mutual advantage between the parties. Plus, I don't want to punish you just out of petty revenge. All I want from you is the right to buy land in your town, that's it. Of course, I can give Prince a mansion for free if he wishes. Even though Corco wasn't favored, a prince settling down in Porcero would at least send a signal of the town's rise to the other nobles. However, the prince immediately crushed Lord Selina's hopes and dreams with a wagging finger. I think you misunderstood. I don't want to live here, I want to do business. As I've said, we have lots of men and materials on our ships. I need enough land along the harbor to store all that cargo, at least for the time being. Oh, I also want to buy at least one workshop, preferably near the harbor and close to my new warehouses. And of course I'll need a store inside the inner city walls, so my customers can peruse my wares. If you have to give me something for free, just count that shop as a mansion, thank you very much. Since Prince needs so much land, the cost needs to be calculated in a proper manner. With the size of his fleet, Corco would have a hard time storing his goods anywhere else along the east coast, so there was no competition. Considering the size of the sale, Quintus saw a chance to make some money off of the obviously wealthy returnee. Of course, and if the price is fair, I might just forget about the attempt on my life. However, with the size of his fleet, Corco now owned the strongest navy on the east coast, so Quintus made the wise decision to play fair. Of course. This lord has no interest in material possessions. Though I wonder what exactly Prince intends to do with all of this land. It sounds like Prince is working as a merchant. That is unusual. Yeah, I get it. Merchants aren't popular, Corco replied with a dismissive tone and a wave of his hand. As a result, Quintus felt obliged to educate the prince. Leeches and parasites, that's all they are. How could a member of House Pluritac? I'm not interested in money, Corco interrupted, if that's what you mean. Was that not the case? Of course not. Trade is important for ideas to spread and for countries to have good relations. I don't care if I lose money so long as I can promote trade. Plus, we need to replace this increased role the Arcavian merchants seem to be playing in Medalla. I just don't want to leave the future of my country in the hands of men who will bleed it dry if they ever get the chance. I'd rather see our future in our own hands. Not only do I want to establish a stable trade route across the Weltalic Sea to the Arcavian continent, I also want to see trade increase up and down the coastline. Especially up and down the coast actually. And it'll all end up here. Every grain of rice, every roll of cloth, every pot and pan and every piece of silver. In time, you will come to see that your goals and my goals are entirely compatible. In that case, this lord will look forward to it. Somewhat freed of his previous reservations, Quintus put on a politician's smile and took out the city map, to decide on which plots to sell. Although he wouldn't be able to fleece this prince, there was still much to skim from a man who hadn't been on home soil in 7 years. Underscore 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 armed with a content smile and some signed and sealed documents, Corco came out into the yard, where Fidelio and his other men had already waited for him. They were disarmed, but looked otherwise unfazed by the events of the past few hours. Since Selina had been so kind as to release the initial messenger as well, they had even added another man to their ranks. Master Corco, what happened? As soon as his master came exit the castle, Fidelio came forward, a worried frown on his face. Of course Corco brushed the question off right away. No worries. Rather, what happened with you guys? They wouldn't dare touch us. Not after Master's simple speech intimidated their whole army. With a grin, the warriors' worries disappeared, to Corco's satisfaction. Good. I have learned quite a few things from Selina. And we even made a little profit on the side. Swinging his newly acquired deeds in Fidelio's vague direction, Corco continued. Things in Medalla look quite a bit different from what we thought. It seems like we need to change our plans. Yes, Master. As usual, Fidelio became earnest once matters were pressing, and obeyed command without question. He motioned towards the mercenaries, who shouldered their packed-up weapons and armors in response. Once they were positioned around their employer to guarantee his safety, they followed Corco out of the opened yard, back towards the harbor. As the setting sun painted the world red and threw the shadow of Ciro's castle onto their backs, they made their path towards the assembled fleet, down the same road they had come before. Chapter 37 Distribution of Wealth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Corco was happy. For the first time in years, he could feel comfortable in his own skin again. When he looked down on the precious silken robe and tunic which covered his body, he could sense the tradition of hundreds of years of craftsmanship course through his skin. Held back by his new hairband, the crown prince's previously unbound hair no longer hung into his line of sight at last and revealed a clear, open view on the world he had missed all these years. Back when he had left Arcavia for his return here, Corco had finally stopped whitening his skin, no longer content to pretend a role he wasn't willing to fill. However, only now that he had hung up his Bornish merchant clothes and replaced them with the free-flowing silks of the Medallian upper class could he feel like himself once more. Only now did he feel ready to face the demons of his past. So that's your style here. A bit garish, huh? With a grin as crooked as his character, Dedrick the fake knight greeted Corco back into the sunlight. While the prince had gone through the final fitting in Porcero's best tailor shop, the mercenary captain and his men had made sure that the commoners of Etra wouldn't cause a commotion outside, since they all wanted to get a glimpse of the mysterious crown prince who had returned from the dead. You have a problem with your eyes, Arcavian? Corco asked his employee with a raised brow. This is pure Chutwa silk, a robe over a tunic, both woven, folded and stitched with the greatest care. The folds themselves are the result of centuries of tradition, each one the result of generations of thought and devotion. Each piece is much more sophisticated than your barbarian vests. True. Women's dresses tend to be more complicated anyways. Unwilling to indulge the mercenary any further, Corco ignored Dedrick's nonsense and Atau's laughter. He instead decided to focus on the essentials. So where is that massive crowd from before? Don't tell me you threatened the people of this nice port town. We've been over this. These are my subjects now, so I'd rather you held back a bit with the bandit attitude. Don't make trouble and leave the people alone. Boss, I didn't do anything. Even if I felt like torturing some random peasants, which I don't, I know you wouldn't want that. No matter what, I won't piss off the guy who has my money, and the only one who can get me and my men back home. I'm not an idiot. Already anticipating the reaction, Dedrick turned over to Atau's provocative smirk. What, you got a problem, Captain Bucket? Anyways, after his threat had only earned him a careless shrug from Atau, Dedrick explained the disappearance of the masses with a gesture down the street, back towards the harbor. Your precious subjects are over there. Looks like your royal authority got nothing on Ronnie and the kid. A bit in the distance, a small crowd had formed around two figures. By the pier, in front of Corco's fleet, the lanky alchemist with the frilly clothes and the chubby merchant with the golden rings formed an odd, but effective pair, as each held up an object of the crowd's desire. With loud voices, they called over the crowd's murmur to praise the benefits of the exotic products sold by the fast-grade merchant company. Oh, for fucks. Can we get those two away from there? We're not merchants, not anymore. Bring them over before they get into trouble, I've got an announcement to make. On it, Master Corco. In response to Corco's annoyance, Fidelio stepped up and made his way through the crowd and towards the final two members of their little group. Even though Dedrick still held on to his grin, at least Fidelio and Atau, the Medalan natives within their group, would understand just how problematic it was to be considered a merchant here. If Ronnie and BRYM started to sell luxury products to commoners, they would have a tough time getting accepted by the elites in the capital, or anywhere else, for that matter. Just in time, the warrior managed to rip the two chatterboxes away from the glamour of fame, and soon their little band of five, and Dedrick, had entered one of the cleaner side alleys in the outer city. Shielded by the rest of Dedrick's mercenaries and communicating in Bornish, they would be safe enough to readjust their plans. Okay, here's the rub, Corco began. For now, I'm still the crown prince of the Medalla Empire, but somehow, I'm also dead. Now, I have no idea how the people in the capital came to that weird idea, but there's nothing we can do about it until we reach Arguna and ask the people who declared my death directly. On top of that, my two brothers have become front-runners for the throne in my absence, both under support from foreign kingdoms. All of this is serious trouble and will complicate my ascension to emperor by quite a bit. We're not without our own advantages though. We've been preparing for this for half a decade and stacked one superiority on top of the next. Now is the time to cash in all those investments. So first, in order to take full advantage of all of our strengths, we'll have to split up. A moan rang through the crowd, as everyone except Fidelio and Atau began to sound their dissatisfaction. Look, I can't be everywhere at once, and we're half a year behind the competition. We need to catch up, and I need you guys in the right spots, to make sure we maximize our strength. Can I count on you guys for this? For a while, Corco's eyes moved from one of his friends to the next, until all of them had replied with a determined nod. First off. BRYM, you're gonna stay here and help establish our first two shops, one in the inner city and a second one in the outer city. Got it bro, the young merchant replied with a sloppy salute. Wait a second, Dedrick interrupted the sortie. You're just gonna leave the kid here all by himself. Isn't that a bad idea? He is hardly a kid anymore. And Ronnie will stay here as well, at least until we've set up the stills for the brandy production. Until then, the two can get into the good graces of the locals, which is sort of their superpower anyways. After he had dealt with Dedrick's moaning, Corco turned to the two smooth talkers, who had already proven without a doubt that they could deal with the local crowds. You think you can handle this? Yeah, no problem bro, BRYM replied. An easy task for the great alchemist Bombasticus. As my first mission in the Occident, I had hoped for a greater challenge, one befitting of my talents, a much more flamboyant Ronnie answered with both his words and his hands. Okay, Corco clapped, there you have it. They'll be fine. Next up, I'll have to get to the capital. If we don't make it there by the time the elders of the Ancestral Hall announce the next candidate for emperor, we'll be out of luck. Even if we don't make it in time, at least we need to get there before the Nobles' Assembly confirms the Hall's choice. Otherwise this entire operation is a bust. I'll take Fidelio with me, as my personal attendant. And Dedrick. You'll come too. Go pick 100 of your guys to go along as well, as moral support. No, wait a second. Once again, Dedrick interrupted Corco's grand planning session, with no regard for gravitas. Didn't you say before that there's an entire army waiting in that capital of yours? What the hell are we supposed to do with one measly company? What about the rest of our troops? Just like before, Corco did his best to answer with the driest look he could muster. Did you hear a word I said when I described the Medalla Empire? We're not really all that keen on outsiders here. Not a single place in the world is keen on outsiders, Dedrick fired back. Point taken. Still, this isn't a sightseeing trip. I'm touring to become emperor. If I come to invade the capital with a foreign army, it's gonna be a bad look, even if those foreigners are sworn in as my warriors. That's why we're only taking 100, and why no other foreigners can come along. Having Ronnie or Brym with us would be a great help, but I can't have Arcavians speak for me before the nobles. Especially not when I'm trying to win over the traditionalist forces in the country. Being anti-Arcavian is their whole deal. If nothing else, with this many soldiers no one would believe we died to bandits. Just in case someone gets any funny ideas and starts to dress up his warriors. As for war, we'll get our allies once we reach the capital. Then we can have their troops work for us instead. Besides, I'd rather not start my reign with a war anyways, not if I can avoid it. One more reason to not bring too many outsiders. So what about me then? I just stay with the fleet. Once Dedrick had been pacified, Atau chimed in at last to finish off their group. No, you'll need to get south, to your family. In response, the captain scoffed and scowled. I know you haven't left on the best of terms, but if we want this emperor business to work out, we'll need all the support we can get. If nothing else, we should have the south on our side. There is no way the Sashi lords will support my other brothers. After all, I'm the only southern member of the imperial family. And your father is still the governor of the south. With an exaggerated expression of annoyance, one Korko knew full well was faked, Atau rubbed his face and pretended to be torn for a moment, before he gave in with a sigh. Fine, I'll do it. Great. In that case you'll have to get all of Dedrick's soldiers, plus our new craftsmen and our fast-grade accounting team across the south, over into your dad's territory. They really should have just landed here, but my precarious status is only gonna endanger these guys. It's better we park them in allied territory for now. We can't have our precious artisans stay cooped up on a ship until I'm emperor, not after all the stuff we promised them for following us here. Oh, also. Since you'll be moving along the east coast anyways, you can bring Ronnie along later as well, since he's already well liked by the other craftsmen. And he can do way more over there. Korko looked over to his old stage partner, who managed to read his mind as usual. That would mean my skills as alchemist require me to make fertilizer. And perhaps some additional powder in case our battle runs long and we have need of the additional barrels we have packed. A nod from the prince confirmed Ronnie's hunch. Once we have our soldiers in the south we can combine forces with the governor's estate and use the southern army to put some pressure on Arguna. Though that might strain our supplies in the long run, so it's better to be prepared. That would be all I guess. Anyone else have any ideas about the distribution? If I'm supposed to set up shop I'll need a couple people too. Some accountants and a few guards to make sure we get the shops operational soon. And so no one gets any ideas about stealing secret formulas and such, Brym added. Sure thing. Just pick a couple volunteers to stay with you. I still don't get it. Once more, Dedrick played the voice of dissent. That Lord Salina tried to kill you and you just took, as if nothing happened. We killed no one, took nothing, demolished nothing. No retaliation at all. What's with that soft attitude? You want everyone to walk all over you. In response to the mercenary captain's annoyed outburst, Korko replied with the same calm as before, almost as if it hadn't been his own life which had been threatened. Ultimately, Salina just acted in his own interest. And in his family's, which is much more laudable. That's the problem with Medalla though. Everyone in this place only ever thinks of themselves and their own at the cost of everyone else. It makes us miss the big picture. In Salina's mind, there is absolutely nothing wrong with his actions because that's how we've always been doing things. And by we, I don't mean Yaku, I mean people. Humans. The challenge for the future is to incentivize good behavior. Or if all else fails, we can at least increase the circle of what people consider their own. That's what will get us into the future. If I act the same as Salina and also follow through with this whole violence begets violence nonsense, we will never start to solve the problem. Besides, Dedrick had already tuned out of another one of Korko's lectures, but still glanced to the side when he realized that his boss had stopped talking. He saw his employer's sly grin and understood that the speech wasn't over yet. However much you think those land deeds I bought from Selina are worth, take that number 50 times over. You've also been to the big Arcavian port towns like Valerna and Whiteport. What do you think will happen with the land value in Porcero once it becomes the main trading hub between the east and the west? I already own a third of what will be the central harbor district for the most important trading hub in Medalla. That man probably thought he ripped me off with this price, but he simply lacks imagination. When I bought those deeds, I took more money from Lord Quintus Selina than he has ever seen in his life. Spoken like a true merchant, the mercenary scoffed. I know I'm repeating myself, but you best cut that kind of talk out right now. I know most people don't understand Bornish here, but if, against all odds, someone actually does, we're all in huge trouble. If you screw up and ruin my reputation, I will have to look for a new captain, which just sounds like a total pain. Don't forget, you and your men are my warriors right now, not just hired hands. Everything you do reflects back on me. If that reflection is unflattering, I don't really have a choice but to discard it. Until I'm emperor, my neck is on the line as well. With a much softer tone, Corco turned over to Brym. That goes for you as well. You better present yourself as Brimstock de Pluritac, warrior servant of Crown Prince Corcopeka. If people find out that you're an actual merchant, it's gonna be nothing but trouble. Sure, the youngster answered in a light tone. I don't think hiding will be a problem. I mean, people tend to be remarkably blind if they have enough gold and silver in front of them. Shocked and stunned, Corco stared at his realist little brother for a few seconds, before his brain managed to reboot and return on topic. Okay, fine, he shook his head with a smile. Anyways, I guess this will be goodbye for now. We already got a good caravan of donkey carts sponsored by our generous governor Selina. Now there's just one more thing to do here in Porcero, just one more step before we're on our way to the capital. Which would be? Atau asked, no doubt impatient to get back to his crew. In response, Corco's lips began to form into a smile, the kind which would make his enemies shiver and his friends roll their eyes. Don't you remember that we still have an invitation with the winemakers? It's time to get some raw materials, make some allies, and return some favors. Chapter 38 Allies. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A few minutes after Corco had readjusted his plans, he found himself in front of the Petrocilius Manor, with two of his warriors in tow. Corco decided to bring Fidelio and, against his own better judgment, Dedrick as well, though he had sworn in the mercenary on a vow of silence. Despite their agreement with Porcero's lord, the rest of their expedition party was forced to wait outside of the city walls, by the harbor. No Medallan lord would ever allow a foreign army into their walls, the paranoid governor of the East doubly so. In Medalla, wars between estates were considered good form after all. Primus Vitus Petrocilius greets Crown Prince Corcopeka. With a well-practiced formal greeting, the young noble went forward half a step and welcomed the emperor's heir. While Corco disliked the strict etiquette enforced at the courts, he would have to make a good impression if he wanted to win over anyone. Thus he decided to play along and reply in kind. Corcopeka de Pluritac greets young Master Petrocilius. House Petrocilius is greatly honored to greet the Crown Prince as a guest. As House Pluritac is honored to be hosted. With the stiff formalities done, the two family representatives were free to talk like normal people again. I really need to thank you for your help yesterday. Your presence during the arrest made things a lot simpler. Corco started the proper conversation. On the contrary, House Petrocilius has to thank Crown Prince. We have awaited Prince Corco for a long time. Never did we believe the lies about Crown Prince's death. Just for this reason, we had stationed a few warriors at the port to spot Crown Prince's arrival. Even this young master was sent to Porcero to oversee the efforts. Of course, House Petrocilius is under direct administration of Governor Selina and never intended to oppose the governor in any manner. Thus, this young master must apologize for any inadequacies. You did more than enough, Korko waved off the kid's modesty. Oh no, this young master assures that any effects of his actions were nothing but a happy accident. No deliberate attempt has been made to oppose any of Governor Salina's plans. Truly, as a small family, House Petrosilius would never dare act so bold as to stop. Annoyed by Primus' endless apology, Korko interrupted the youngster's Weasley words before he would get angry and start hitting people. This was exactly why he hated the court politics of Medalla. There's no reason to do any of this crap. You get that, right? I mean, I understand. You're just trying to make sure Salina can't hold any of this against you, but you're not making yourself any friends if you don't commit to a side. You're just gonna piss me off, and Salina is still gonna hate you for your interference, deliberate or not. If there was one thing Korko had always despised about his homeland's culture, it was the two-faced nature of its lords and their lackeys. Within the various courts and halls of Medalla, it was standard procedure to flatter, deceive and deflect. In the face of higher authority, subordinates were quick to admit mistakes and degrade themselves. In most cases, the intention was to shame their masters into leniency. They would abuse all the rituals and formalities of the court as well as common courtesy to achieve their selfish goals. Arguments based on feeling and rhetoric, short-term thinking and sophistry were what ruled the political debates of Medalla. The winner would always be whoever was the greatest liar and whoever managed to bend the convoluted rules most adroitly. From a young age Korko and his brothers had been educated in the art of saying nothing. Since then, the Crown Prince had only grown to despise this way of doing politics even more. His new memories hadn't exactly helped matter either. While the prince's remembrance of his past had put him in a progressively lousier mood, Primus had thrown awkward glances back at his guest, unsure of what to do. In desperation, he turned back towards the tall servant warrior who had kept himself to the young master's side. Called upon by his future lord, the warrior stepped in to support his lord. Young master, for now we should not let our guest stand outside like this. It is discourteous. Of course. Let's go inside. Eager to change topics, or at least to move the disagreement to a more private setting, Primus agreed with his warrior before he turned back to Korko. With a careful, "This way please," he led the way beyond the gates of the Petrosilius manor. As soon as they had entered they found themselves in front of a small rock garden, surrounded by 3 low wooden mansions. Ooh, what a truly magnificent water feature! Fidelio said while he pointed towards the pond in the Petrosilius manor's front yard. Master Korko, we should ask to hold meditation here. Once more presented with the change topics and sell a favor all at once, Primus jumped on the chance to ease the atmosphere. Of course, Crown Prince and his men may feel at ease and treat our family's estate as their own. As usual, Fidelio had read the atmosphere better than anyone. With a gloomy sigh, Korko shoved the thoughts of his past into the back of his mind and restored his calm. One matter at a time, the prince said. First we should have a talk. There is much to discuss after all. Of course. Our servants have already prepared a lavish menu for Prince to enjoy. This way, please. Relieved to see his guest's mood restored, the young master guided the group into the mansion. Underscore 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 like so many things in Eastern Medalla, the dining room they entered soon after was undeniably old-fashioned. Covered over and over with abstract symbols, the walls told the stories of the Yaku founding myth, as well as those of divine entities revered in the area. Positioned by the large, open paper windows, a small table had been loaded with bowls of rice, grilled meats and greens of various kinds. Surrounded on 3 sides by 3 wooden upholstered lounge chairs. This must be the most stereotypically traditional dining room on the entire Twin Isles, Korko thought. Prince Korko, Please do us the honor of taking the head lounge, Primus said. With a nod, Corco spread himself on one of the chairs at the sides, before Primus took a seat to his opposite. According to the usual custom, the lounge in the middle would be reserved for the least important person at the table. As a result, Corco wasn't all too surprised when the warrior servant of the Petrocilius clan took a seat as well. It appeared as if House Petrocilius didn't trust their immature young master to handle negotiations by himself. Hopefully Prince Corco will find the head lounge adequate, an eager Primus continued after he had laid down. Of course. Though to be honest, after all these years away, eating on a lounge chair feels uncommon. In truth, Corco was being polite. Even 7 years ago, before Corco's departure for Arcavia, no one in the capital had been using lounge chairs anymore. As soon as the two young nobles started their conversation, the servants took it as a sign to start the feast as well. Armed with a jug of wine, a Petrocilius servant came to the table and poured drinks for everyone. At the same time, others brought an array of fruits as appetizers. Ah yes, so how was it? The Orient? Primus asked with a sparkle in his eye. Unlike what some stories might suggest, the Arcavians don't have scales. They don't eat people either. But compared to here there are still a lot of differences. We should look at those and see if there's anything to learn. Especially when it comes to craftsmanship and other skill-based knowledge. Though in terms of intellectual thought, they're pretty much useless. Corco showed some restraint and waited until Primus, the family heir, had taken a sip of the wine on offer before he took one himself. He wasn't interested in surprises. Of course the barbarians cannot compare to the wisdom of our great ancestors, Primus said with a beaming smile on his face, much to Corco's own dismay. So what makes the foreigners so useless, if Prince Corco would be so kind? Well, for one, they don't eat lying down, was Corco's reply. Annoyed, he stretched his body and tried to get into a less uncomfortable position. After he had achieved minor success, the prince decided to answer in earnest. First, their cities are disgusting, sprawling messes. Some of their zealotry makes anything you say a risk, especially as a non-believer in their crazy Arcavis cult. Anyone who is even the slightest bit different will be ostracized. Is that so? Primus asked, his smile still plastered all over his face. Either the kid was a much better actor than he seemed, or he still hadn't understood Corco's implication. Maybe it was time to be a bit more direct, the prince thought. So, what's going on with all the short-sleeved commoners I've been seeing around? Some new kind of fashion trend? Although Corco wasn't very interested in the over-seasoned meats of Metala's nobility, still put an unidentifiable piece in his bowl. In an attempt to improve the anticipated taste, he drowned it in the fish sauce of Medalla he had so sorely missed in all of his years away. It didn't go too well. Disappointed, he realized that even the fish sauce served in the Petrocilius manner was old-fashioned, rather than one of the brands he liked. Even though the prince had given the other side plenty of time to answer the question, Primus still had trouble. That would be because. At last he began an answer, but soon halted with a frown. To his luck however, the old warrior servant jumped in to save his young master. They are the new laws ratified by the capital. Governor Saliina would have been eager to impress Arguna. Reminded of the old man's presence, Corco stretched his neck to make eye contact with the warrior. So who's making all those laws then? There's no ruling emperor right now, isn't there? I thought that was why I was here. The new laws are ratified by the ancestral hall, which has taken to governance in the absence of a ruling emperor. That's what Saliina says too. It's hardly normal though, is it? Nothing like this has ever happened, so what is different this time? This servant is inconsolable that he cannot provide an answer to Prince. Maybe because of Prince Corco's grandfather. Elder Caelestis was the emperor himself and is not very old yet. Surely the elder must have great prestige within the ancestral hall, Primus chimed in. No matter how the hall got this much power, why would the elders make an insane law like banning sleeves? Do they want to start another North-South war? With a dull face, Primus blinked back before his slow answer. I do not understand. Supposedly, all pirates wear inkings on their arms, easy to recognize, but otherwise hidden beneath their sleeves. The measure is meant to combat the pirate trouble, as requested by the Chutwa Empire. Why would this upset the southern lords? In fucking Porcero. Corco shouted in disbelief. Where are the fucking pirates here? Corco calmed himself, despite the poor excuse. The Western Chutwa Empire had been raided by Yaku pirates for a long time. Considering the arrogance with which the Chutwa handled their foreign politics, Corco was not surprised that they would try to force Medalla into cooperation. However, any pirates on the east coast had nothing to do with an empire far in the west. Nonetheless, Corco wouldn't confront the young master just over some short sleeves. Things were looking increasingly murky and he would need all the help he could get. Thus, the Crown Prince took a deep breath before he explained himself to the young master. The new law not only targets pirates. It also showing off the biceps of all the men from the south, to reveal their own tattoos. It's like the only cultural difference between the north and south anyways. This way, it becomes easy to distinguish between the two sides. It'll only cause increased friction and make another civil war more likely. After he had shocked Primus speechless, Corco sank into thought for a while. What does my brother think about all of this? He asked at last with another turn to the knowledgeable old servant. This servant is unsure. However, third Prince Pachacutic holds support from House Achilia. It would be of no surprise if the third prince were to assume their attitude. After all, House Achilia's dislike towards the south is well documented. Wait a second. Achilia supports the littlest brother. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Why wouldn't they support Amautu instead? He's older after all, the oldest imperial prince with Achilia blood. Confused, the prince glanced between the servant and master, in hopes for an answer. That's. Primus looked past Corco and out of the window, in an attempt to avoid eye contact, as obvious as it was inelegant. There is word that Prince Amautu and concubine Spuria have had a disagreement in the past. Since then the lady and her family have decided to support her second-born Pachacutic instead. Much less inhibited than his young ward, the old servant answered Corco's question instead. For a moment Corco just thought about the possible implications of this shift in power, before he realized something strange. Okay, so the Ancestral Hall is making up laws, the Achilias don't like the Southerners and the Achilias support the third prince. That's still no reason for this sort of discrimination to slip through, is it? I mean, House Achilia doesn't control the Ancestral Hall, do they? And they only have a leg up with one of the princes, not both of them, right? While this servant cannot comment on the inner workings of the Ancestral Hall, at least when it comes to the princes, Prince Amautu cannot be called an adequate counterweight to Prince Pachacutic at this time. Wait, he isn't. He's the elder brother, why would they not stick with him? Unlike the Arcavian nobles, the lords of Medalla valued birthright far higher. In most cases, the eldest son would inherit his father's title without question. Prince Amautu has not been back in the country for a long time either. Pensive, Corco thought back to what Salina had said about his brother's allegiance. He's been in Chutwa, huh? Indeed. Second prince has been away on foreign study. Emperor Titus sent his second son away shortly after Prince Corco's departure, to balance the scales they say, the servant explained. In response, Primus threw the bowl in his hand back onto the table to produce a loud clatter, before he propped himself up with urgency. Oh no, in fact, I heard that the second prince's exile was related with the conflict between him and his mother. There seems to have been. Of course House Petrocilius would never put any credence in rumors. Unusual in his brashness, the servant interrupted the enthusiastic Primus, before he continued his explanation as if nothing had happened. As a result of Prince Amautu's absence, Prince Pasha has become the strongest contender for the throne. Even so, Korko wasn't convinced. Still seems weird that the little one would have this much support. Prince Pasha is not little. No, he is the greatest hero of our generation, even though he is merely 6 seasons older than myself, an agitated Primus answered. That brat. I'm surprised he's even of age yet. His maturity rites can't have been more than a year ago. What heroic things can a kid have done? Even though the third prince is young, Prince Pakakutek is already an accomplished duelist. Undefeated in 100 bouts, they say. I have not had the pleasure of meeting Prince Pasha, but it is said that he is the true embodiment of a Medalla warrior. While Primus was off in his own world, consumed with thoughts of his little man. Crush, the old servant filled in the blanks for Korko. Indeed, the young prince's direct attitude and martial prowess have won over many of the more martial lords, especially in the Empire Center. In addition, since Prince Pasha has support from the eastern kingdoms of Arcavia, he has managed to win over many eastern lords as well, all those who would benefit from a trade route established with the Orient. Seems like those lords don't include Petrosilius, Korko thought. Of course this was not something he could say out loud. There was no reason to offend his hosts. But Prince Amaudu should also have the support of the Western Empire, should he not? Why not build his own trade route to the west then? Primus asked instead. This time it was Korko's turn to explain. Even if he does have the support, Chutwa was never interested in any lands beyond their borders. They won't value something banal like a trade route. Instead, we should be glad that the Chutwa don't have us in their sights. Otherwise, they might just turn us into another one of their tributaries, a slave state. Korko answered Primus, before he turned back over to the old servant, the only one who could provide Korko with any meaningful answers here. Even with those lords on Pasha's side, that still doesn't add up to even half the estates in Medalla. Since he's the older brother, Amaudu should have almost everyone else on his side, right? Rather than a straight answer like before, the servant showed emotion for the first time and replied with a light sigh. Indeed, one would assume so. But many of the lords have lost their way. Maybe things have been peaceful for too long, but it seems as if fewer and fewer lords value the ancient traditions. Only here, in the East, a number of lords are dedicated to our ancient customs and carried Prince Amaudu's flag for a while. However, now that Crown Prince has returned, all of this might change. At last, the conversation had reached its critical point. Up until now, House Petrosilius had provided Korko with information to gain his favor. Now however, it was the Crown Prince's turn to return it. Now it was time for his sales pitch. Might, the prince asked with caution. So the support of the eastern estates is not guaranteed for me, is it? Despite their insistence on tradition, on the primacy of the firstborn. Prince Korko, there are multiple factors at play here. After all, even though Prince Korko is the firstborn son of the late emperor, Prince himself has been declared dead by the ancestral hall. This gives the lords enough room to make a decision on whether or not Prince may be worthy of support. So you're playing sophist then, Korko said with the sternest look he could muster. This way, you can pick and choose however you want, while you pretend to follow the rules, huh? Despite Korko's harsh words, the servant only smiled. Prince has been away for 7 years after all. 7 years in foreign lands, surrounded by foreigners. Who knows what kind of man has come back after all this time? Okay, guess it's time to bring my ideas to the table. Korko raised his body from his lounge chair and turned towards his silent attendants to the side. Fidelio, bring the brandy. Without a sound, Fidelio held the bottle of 5-year brandy they had brought and walked towards the table. Meanwhile, Korko kept the conversation going. So, what do you think of your estate's wine, young master? He asked towards Primus. Petrosilius wine is unique in its fruity flavor. Although we might not be as well known as some other estates, our wines are as good as any other in Medalla. With a puffed chest, Primus made no secret of his family pride. What esteemed opinion does Prince Korko have? It's quite good, actually. As Korko sipped the wine from before, he lied through his teeth without shame. Somewhat sour and astringent, far from the best wine he had ever tasted, in either life. Still, by the standards of Medalla, the taste was commendable, if unremarkable. While Fidelio filled 3 fresh cups, Korko continued. This drink is called brandy. It is an Eastern specialty product. Feel free to have a taste. Be careful though, it's pretty strong. As instructed, the old servant took a careful sip, before he raised an eyebrow at the rippling amber liquid and then looked back at the crown prince's eager stare. This brandy is quite. Cough cough, both the interrupted servant and the addressed crown prince turned their heads to the source of the disturbance. On the third lounge chair, the awkward Primus had already handed his cup to another one of his servants. Instead, he was busy wiping his brandy-stained tunic. With his jaw still scrunched up from the taste, he looked out the window again. Apologies. Lo. This brandy is quite something, the servant brushed over the little incident. The taste is powerful, like a drink for a true man should be. However, to this servant's surprise, it has a refined note to it. How should I say it? Well-rounded, Korko helped out. Yes, well-rounded and well said, the servant joked before he took a second, larger sip. Satisfied, the prince leaned back in his lounge. From here, the rest would be easy. So a drink like this would be popular among the nobles here. Of course. It could find its way into mansion cellars all across the land. What if I told you that this brandy is made from ordinary wine? For a second, the servant's eyes grew larger, before his face returned to its unreadable state. Prince Korko would not be in possession of this method, would he? With a smile the prince gave the expected answer. As it so happens, I am. However, I would still need the raw materials for it. A wine like this one would be perfect, I believe, he said while he held up the cup filled with Petrocilius wine. Although things were going so well, Primus interrupted the discussion with a frown. This young master is surprised Prince Korko would speak like a merchant. A prince should strive for higher goals than copper. What about honor, tradition? It's not the copper I'm interested in. It's insulation and interconnection. Despite the admonishment, Korko kept his calm. What answered him was a dull look from the young master. Would Prince explain? The servant asked instead. In age, this old servant has gotten quite slow. Sure thing, the prince replied with an energetic voice. First, insulation. Now that the Arcavians have taken Medalla into their sights, this brandy and many other novel products will soon flood our markets. They'll make their way into the noble mansions as well. As a result, the foreign merchants could make us dependent on their products, not to mention the wealth sapped out of empire in the trade. I want to avoid that. The best way to do so is to preempt them. If we can produce locally what they bring from overseas, we can insulate ourselves from their negative influence. Prince Korko is wise beyond his years. This old man is in deep awe. Rather than acknowledge the obnoxious fake flattery, Korko continued his lecture. As far as interconnection is concerned. Well, interconnectedness actually, but who likes disparate suffixes? In any case, assume the following. Every noble in Medalla were to drink brandy. It would become a staple of noble life. What do you believe would happen to House Petrocilius if it was the sole producer? Deep in thought, both hosts frowned and stared at the food on the table. In the short term, the estate would grow in strength, but we would also be an easy target for attack. The ones to produce this brandy would gain immensely in wealth and prestige, but such a sudden rise breeds enemies. To Korko's surprise, this time it was the young master who answered back, accompanied by the servant's gratified nod. Exactly. With emphatic force, Korko slammed his fist onto his headrest. By now he sat upright, too excited to see his long-term plans come to fruition. But what happens if the wine is produced by House Petrosilius, but the brandy is produced elsewhere? Say, here in Porcero. And what if the technology to produce brandy controlled by a third estate? Like mine. In that case, an attack on any one of these powers wouldn't gain control over the brandy. As long as the three constituents of this alliance were to stick together, a successful attack on one of them would only mean no more brandy for anyone. Which would not only make the attacker three enemies at once, it would also annoy every lord who would then have to hold his banquets without his new favorite drink. Oh, if Prince Corco had any more products like this, we could forge the entire East together into one solid block, an excited Primus added. Contented, Corco himself calmed down again. His first talks with the nobles of Medalla had been a rousing success. As I said before, there are many novel products across the sea and I have brought as many as I could. With them, I will connect the estates of Medalla, reduce the influence of the foreign merchants, prevent further infighting between the families, improve their cohesion and stabilize the system. This way, we may rule these lands for centuries more. On that wish I salute. Animated by the thoughts of a prosperous future, the young master forgot his inhibitions and raised the cup of brandy once more. Salute, Corco answered in kind. Chapter 39 Electoral Campaign. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A feeling of absolute calm enveloped his entire being, like floating in the tranquil sea. Driven along the surface, the push and pull of gently rocking waves mimicked the breath of an enormous, gentle being, slowly rocking back and forth, all-encompassing. And so he adjusted his own breath to the rhythm and lost himself in the waves. When he opened his eyes again he saw fish swirl like leaves in a current. Awakened from his meditation at the Petrosilius Manor's front yard pond, Corco looked around to get back his bearings. The world's embrace, his ancient family cultivation method, was one of the few things in this world which defied his understanding, at least for the moment. Though he needed to solve one problem at a time. The most pressing of these problems being Fidelio, he called. Yes, master. While his lord had been meditating, the warrior had stood by his side, ready and alert. Looks like we'll have support from the eastern families. That's our first stone on the board. With a nod, Fidelio stretched out his arm and helped his master back on his feet. So what now? The same estates will be the first to stand in our way as soon as we try to reform and modernize. Agile on his feet, Corco turned a circle to get his blood pumping and began to move towards the mansion's exit. Morning had broken a while ago and with his routine done, the prince was ready to continue on in his journey, further into his homeland. No worries, we won't need their support forever. And we have to make sure to gain control of the empire first and foremost. Only then can we even consider meaningful reforms, to everyone's benefit. By then, even the old-fashioned houses like Petrosilius will thank us. Their baggage slung over his shoulder, Fidelio followed his lord out of the mansion, towards the waiting caravan. Maybe I'm slow again, but we let them take part in our business just now. With all the influence and wealth they will gain from the cooperation, won't we just strengthen an eventual enemy? Those estates will seal their fate all on their own. They won't be the ones to profit from the business. At least not the most. That honor would go to their merchants, their craftsmen and their peasants. The high and mighty lords won't even notice. Like so many in the world, they're too busy looking to the sides or looking up. For hundreds of years, no one in this place has ever bothered to look down. With a frown, the prince stared over to the head of the caravan, where the young master Primus Petrosilius, representative of all the bad, old-fashioned habits of Medalla, had taken a seat atop a donkey cart. With great enthusiasm, the youngster waved at the crown prince and his servant as soon as he spotted them. As for us. When he turned towards his friend again, Corco's serious expression had turned into a wide grin. Now that we have official support from some of the estates and a runner to bring the message of my survival to the capital, we'll have a lot more time until we need to get there. We'll also need to drum up some more support to win our election. So let's go run a campaign. Underscore 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 Crown Prince Korkapeka Tid a Pluritak requests entry. The master of the house has left for the capital. Your honorable selves can camp outside since it's getting dark. Then we will be thankful for your hospitality. Underscore 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 underscore. Please do not make things difficult for this servant. Without the master's approval, this servant could lose his head if he were to let Prince Korko inside. Of course. We will seek shelter elsewhere. Underscore 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 dirty imposter. You will not trick this noble son with your words. All of Medalla knows of Prince Korkapeka's lowly death on foreign soil. No matter what tricks you intend to play, leave my lands at once or be prepared to face this young hero's axe. Motherf. After their third night outdoors, it was safe to say that things weren't going too well. Underscore 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 all throughout the morning, Estia had tended to the royal gardens. At last, her work was done. Hunched over to replace the old flowers with new ones for the coming season, her knees had almost given in before she could finish her work. At last, she looked up from the dirt on her freezing hands and over the garden's balustrade. From here, she could see all the way down onto Arguna, the Silver City. All covered in snow, the buildings and roads of Medalla's capital looked truly beautiful. However, she knew that it was all just a facade, a thin veil to cover the true face of the city. Soon, it would be spring, the melting snow an early sign of the coming new year. Once the white blanket was removed, the city would once again show its loud, dirty, ugly nature in all of its glory. While she sat there and caught her breath, two figures entered the garden and played out an ugly scene of a different kind right behind her back. What do you mean, no harm, ? Even though Estia didn't turn to look at the intruders, the woman's scream was unmistakable. Empress Mother Spuria Achilia had entered the scene. Stunned by the arrival of the most powerful woman in the empire, the servant girl made haste to get back onto her knees. With her legs buried in the wet, soft soil once more, she tried to make herself invisible as best as she could. After all, the Empress Mother was well known for her violent outbursts. I mean what I said. No son of House Pluritak will be harmed by his own family. Despite her best efforts, Estia didn't recognize the second voice. All she could tell was that it belonged to a man. Estia was desperate for a stolen glance, but she knew that any more movements would risk her life. Thus, she tried to blend in with the flowers and just listened. Are you telling me that Korko, the little southerner bastard, can be considered a Pluritak? Don't you want to see Pasha become emperor? How much thought have we wasted to get that little beast out of the country? And now he's back. I tell you right away. If the bastard dares enter this palace of mine, I'll slit his throat myself. Enough. In response to the enraged voice, Spuria's shrill rambling died down and quiet fell over the garden. A few breaths later, the unknown male continued. Pakakutek will be emperor. Nothing will change that. He still has the support from House Achilia, does he not? Of course. Which means he also has the support of every estates in central Medalla. After we arranged the deal with the foreign merchant, we also managed to win over anyone along the major trade routes between East and West. Not to mention, with his charm and heroic demeanor, Pasha has won over many more beyond material benefits. Strength counts a great deal among the nobility, especially in these times of upheaval. Filled with pride, the voice continued. Pasha will be emperor. No one can change anything about that. But I won't have you hurt anyone from the imperial family, for your own sake alone. Touch the members of House Pluritak and I will be the first ally you lose. This is no place for a talk. We should meet again later. At the usual spot. As Estia heard Spuria's answer, her heart jumped into her throat. She could feel the Empress Mother's eyes stare daggers into her back. However, after what felt like an eternity, she finally heard the relieving footsteps again. For now she would be safe, but it was time to leave. Any further work in the palace would have to be done by others from here on out. Underscore 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 underscore. Then I hope we have a great work together. With somewhat awkward Yakua, the stout foreigner said his goodbyes. Against the common customs, Prince Amauta answered him with the kind of firm handshake which was common in Arcavia. Lord Kalas, it is this prince's great honor to work together on Metala's future. The foreign merchant lowered his head in respect before he waddled away, down the hallways of the prince's inner city mansion. Since Prince Amautu had far more important issues to consider, the merchant would be guided back out by some servants. After all, how could a commoner of the lowest class ever receive such a great honor from the future emperor of Medalla? As soon as Kalas disappeared around the corner, Amautu returned into the room and sat back down on his seat. Once more the second prince put all his focus into the game board and the lord who played his opponent. While the two nobles became immersed in their play, a plain-looking servant girl sat to the side and watched without a word. By now, her hands had long been cleaned from the dirt of the imperial gardens. Is this truly necessary? To cooperate with these barbarians, the lord opposite of Amauta said. Lord Takeo Batushio, governor of the north. Without a doubt he was a grand figure to play a casual game of chess with, but after Prince Korko had been declared dead, Prince Amautu had become the eldest living heir and the nominal successor to the throne. Even though he had never received the official position of crown prince, it had given his words enough weight to sway the powerful lord to his side. It is, at least for now. At the moment we have firm support from the north and northwest. Every estate touched by the wisdom of the western lands has joined our side. However, now my people tell me that my older brother has been in contact with the old lords of the east. If Korko proves to be more capable than the third prince, we may well lose our alliance with the traditional estates. How dare they betray us? Lord Batushio slammed his hand on the table and sprinkled the playing stones around the floor in the process. With his usual calm, Amautu ignored the outburst and started to pick up the pieces. The second prince had always been patient. It matters little. The traditional estates are weak, and their support will not decide the succession. Still calm, Amautu began to put the pieces back into their dedicated box. This game was over for now. However, the betrayal of the eastern estates establishes Korko as a legitimate successor once more. He is the eldest son, after all, Batushio replied with a frown. Still, Amautu was determined. Even if Korko has every right to the silver throne, I will never back down now. This country needs a firm hand, someone who can lead it into the future. And I am the only one who knows the path to glory. My big brother would have been better off staying dead, Amauta said, the daggers in his voice barely hidden. So that was the reason Prince had to cooperate with the barbarians. With a nervous warble in his voice, Lord Batushio tried to redirect the conversation. My mindless young competitor has gained plenty of support thanks to the bribes from the Arcavian merchants. Why should I not get my own pet dog then? For now, we will need their help, to drag out the war for succession and gain some time. Time enough to convince the lords of Medalla of the righteousness of our teachings. Amauta closed the box of playing stones and stood up. The game's rightful place was besides the scrolls on his shelf and that was where he would take it once more. He had practiced enough for now. It was time for a real game, with real stakes. The wisdom of the way will lead us to the light, the gratified voice of Lord Bertuccio rang from his back. The Lord couldn't see a smile form on Amauda's lips, one in anticipation of things to come. Even if he reached the capital, his elder brother Corco could never achieve his goals. Amaudu had always been patient. It was time to reap the rewards. Underscore 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 Albert Collas Day had already been quite productive. For far too long had he wasted away in these foreign towns and cities, but at last he had found his entry point into the holiest of holies. Now that his alliance with Prince Amaudu had been established, the only way was up. And the day wasn't even over yet. Led by a servant, Albert walked through the open halls of another mansion in the inner city of Metala's capital. Soon, he arrived at a large courtyard covered in sand. In its center, a man of advanced age, with a balding head and long, braided hair, swung his axe away at the air, unrelenting. One powerful swing after another cleaved apart the empty space before him and created sounds to prove the strength of the strikes. His full concentration was taken up by the exercise, his strength obvious from the log-sized arms covered in tattoos. Impatient, Albert tried to move in and speak to his secret ally, but he was held back by the servant who had led him here. For now Steen would play by the rules of the barbarians. After a few more swings, Iktana Vilka, the powerful southern lord, had finished his exercise and came to greet his guest, his axe slung over his shoulder. Kalas. How did the meeting with the second brat go? At the sight of the sweaty lord, Albert took half a step back before he answered in perfect Yakua. The meeting went as expected. Just as Lord Vilka said, Prince Amaudu was very quick to accept cooperation. Of course he would be. That brat has been brave to fight against his own family all this time, but now that the crown prince is back and people are turning their backs on him, he's bound to get cold feet. So is this crown prince not a problem then? He seems to have done well since his arrival. While he took a piece of silk cloth to wipe away his sweat, Vilka shook his head. In the end, Prince Corco is just a Sashi. They don't have much use for us southerners here in the capital. They will never treat him as one of their own. Not to mention, most lords are still undecided anyways, ideal for our goals. But what if the prince proves to be too competent? I have heard stories of his landing at Porcero. He seems much more capable than at least his youngest brother. Despite Albert's attempt at a serious discussion, he was answered by roaring laughter. Well, Prince Pasha is an idiot, so being better is no great feat still, don't forget about House Achilia behind him. Even if the crown prince shows more strength than we expect, all we have to do is pick the weakest side and balance the scales again. Don't forget. Our ultimate goal is a split between the north and the south. In that case, I won't mind Prince Corco in charge of the south, actually. He's one of us after all. Whoever you want to let rule over the north is none of my business then. You'll get your trade through the islands either way. Drenched in sweat, the silk fell to the floor. Without a care, the powerful southern lord stepped away, to march down the hallway. He mumbled under his breath, more to himself than to his guest. It is time for Sashi to take the power back from Arguna. It is time for the south to take its revenge. In anticipation of things to come, Lord Vilka showed his frightening smile. He didn't smile much. He wasn't used to being happy. Underscore 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 along a narrow mountain pass, a snake of mercenaries and donkey carts made the laborious journey uphill. Just like Corco had expected, House Petrocilius had been quick to join his cause. In order to corroborate their new agreements to the traditional estate representatives in the capital, young Master Primus Petrosilius had been sent along with them. By now, they had already made their way halfway over the ever-stunning Salcata mountain range. The rolling hills of the western lowlands had been replaced by the tranquil image of snow-covered pine trees, the mysticity of the sprawling crags and the enormity of the surrounding Salcata mountains themselves. With its numerous terraced fields and the hidden secret symbols and places of worship, meant to be seen and used only by the initiated, it provided a sight ever filled with wonder. Once their caravan passed the mountains, they would be a mere day's journey away from the capital. In the morning, high hopes had accompanied their trek into the pass, but almost the entire day had been spent on the laborious climb. In the end, the number of their men and the wide donkey carts were incompatible with the narrow paths and steep steps. When they hadn't tried to coerce their stubborn donkeys to draw the carts up steep inclines, they would had to worry about the long fall down sheer cliffs. The climb had been tough and tensions were rising. So we could not have taken a different route, is it like that? Dedrick had returned to his usual cynical self after they had left the stiff formalities of the estates. As usual, Corco ignored the rudeness as he answered. Well, we tried that. None of the estates we've visited since Porcero were anywhere near as helpful as House Petrosilius. Maybe you noticed that. And that fucking kid. I'll kill that little bastard for ruining my primary. Seriously, once I'm emperor I'm gonna. Enraged, the crown prince's words trailed off. In truth, he really didn't know himself what he intended to do. You gotta control yourself, boss. We almost got into a war over your ego. Of course the prince understood. Risking the lives of their men over his own pettiness would have been ridiculous. It was the reason why he relented in the end, and had them change course. Still awkward about his lack of success, he looked down into the crags and the raging river down below. Anyways. I didn't think stuff through enough. When we tried to recruit estates, we moved along the main trade routes, because that was the fastest route. Not only are almost all lords in Arguna at this point, they are also the very estates to benefit the most from my youngest brother's trade route. Still, I didn't expect this level of hostility. So we can either keep traveling along the main roads in a futile attempt to gain allies, or we can pick a less beaten path and get to the capital safely. I mean, an ambush on these narrow roads would be bad news, no matter how good your men are. That's why we need to go down this route, even if it takes a bit longer. Plus, there's another place I needed to visit anyways. At least for that one, we're right on track. His path ahead reaffirmed once more, Corco looked up towards the towering mountains and the snowy peaks before him. It would be a cold night. Chapter 40 Music. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Awestruck, bereft of his breath, Corco stared at the stars up above. High above the cloud layer, the firmament was so much brighter than it had been at a lower altitude, a view any man had to see at least once in his life. As if intent to compete for a place across the black velvet of the night, there were so many stars that the sky looked crowded. Nowhere was this more obvious than along what the Yaku called the Road of Stars. Bulked together, they formed one arm of a galaxy, clear and undisguised, for everyone to admire in all of its splendor. After their caravan had crossed the highest portion of the pass, Corco's group had set up camp for the night. Meanwhile, Corco himself had left them on the road down below and made his way up the mountainside by himself. Even though the path via the long, narrow pilgrim steps was difficult, not even Fidelio had felt the need to come along. No one in Medalla would dare attack a pilgrim of Pasha. Alone with his thoughts, the prince had climbed the winding stairs past the tree line and into the barren purity of the snow-covered mountain tops. Although he was prepared with a fur robe for protection against the cold, it had proved of little use. As he marched ahead, he had drawn it ever tighter to his body, while his breath formed clouds before his eyes. At last Corco had arrived at the final ritual bell of the pilgrimage, had rung it like all the others in the past centuries and taken the last few steps to the top. Exhausted, he had reached a plateau and seen the goal of his journey. Urkina, the celestial mountain. L.C. Beneath the starry sky, he found himself upon a wide plateau, the white snow almost blinding, even in the darkness. A world of wonder, covered in an eternal blanket of ice and snow. Even so, within this frozen picture sat a lake, as clear as glass, yet unfrozen. Through the darkness, Korko could only just spot the Pasha temple complex on the opposite shore. Circled around an indented courtyard, the short wooden buildings formed a bowl-like structure with the center. As Korko's steps led him up to the lake, he realized that he was not the only pilgrim on this winter night. Sat by the pond, deep in meditation, Korko spotted a middle-aged man, his back towards the new arrival, a desperate fire against the omnipresent veil of the frozen darkness. Like a statue the man sat, dressed in nothing but simple robes, barely protected from the icy bite of the air. With his head shaven in the style of the Pasha priests, his status became clear. With slow, careful steps, so as to not disturb the priest, Korko approached the holy lake, the crunches of fresh snow under his feet. A few steps short of the shoreline, he looked down to admire the clear reflections of the stars on the mirrored surface. For a while he lost himself in the beauty of the moment. Ever since he had received the gift of knowledge 5 years ago, back when he was at his lowest, he had questioned the nature of the Pasha faith, of his own faith, again and again. The event itself should have hinted at a higher power at play, but he still could never quite shake his doubt. At last, while he stood on the ground and felt his mind sink into the stars, he could accept his beliefs once more. Once again he realized that they were part of who he was, who he had been. Whoever he had become in his time abroad might cast away his faith in the future, but not now. After a while, he couldn't say how long, he had forgotten whether his eyes were aimed down at the lake or up at the stars. Throughout the trance-like calm, a raspy voice offered Korko a line to connect the illusion to reality. "What do you think they mean, youngster?" Immovable, the old man still sat there and stared into the lake as he asked his question. Unsure of what the priest had meant, Korko looked at him with a raised eyebrow and waited for an explanation. With patience, the man obliged. "The stars, what meaning do they have for you to make this harsh journey in the middle of winter?" With a smile the prince stared up into the lake once more. "Humility. And opportunity. They are a proof of humanity's meager stature in the face of the eternal universe. Despite our insistence in our own importance, we can neither fathom nor control them. So they make us aware of our humble nature. And yet, they're also the greatest goal for us to aspire to. Though we should always remain humble and free from arrogance, our goal is in clear view, just above our heads. It is up to us whether or not we can rise beyond ourselves to reach it." When Korko looked back over, the old man seemed pensive, his lowered eyes focused on the lake's deep reflection. "You don't think they appear cold? Just look up at the sky. High up there, shining so brightly like a distant flame in the night, yet they illuminate nothing for the mortals down below, to leave the world a place of cold and darkness. They sit up there in all their splendor, but would provide nothing for beggars such as us. And like beggars, we sit here and beg, as we hope for salvation. In plain view and yet out of reach forever, only there to promise eternal suffering in vain hope." His head still down and his shoulders slumped, the priest's posture reflected his state of mind. "Is that something a priest should be saying?" Korko asked. "I am not a priest and had no intention to pretend otherwise." "I hope this old man did not waste your time with his incessant babbling," he said as he looked up at Korko for the first time since his arrival. What stared back at the prince were hollow eyes, sunk in and desperate, as if their owner had given up, though on what Korko did not know. With a quick wave, Korko accepted the apology, if only to ease the man's suffering. In reply, the old man pointed towards the temple off in the distant darkness. "If you are in need of the priests, they should all be inside. You should go as well. The night is cold. It might get colder." "What about you, old man?" Korko asked. "This old man is quite robust. This is not the first night I have spent out here and I am sure it will not be my last." A tired smile crept onto the man's chapped lips, to complete the picture of a futile struggle. With only the crunching sound of the snow under his feet to accompany him, Korko followed the only footsteps on the plateau and made his way around the lake and towards the temple complex. Soon he entered into the courtyard and headed past the large, elevated ceremonial bell in its center, towards the only light source he could find, a dim lamp in front of one of the low-built wooden huts. His frozen fingers slid open the paper door and brought him into the cold interior. Compared to the frozen world outside, the room felt almost warm. "Oh, ahem. Greetings, honored pilgrim." To Korko's surprise, he was greeted by friendly, if awkward words. Below the dim lamp at the room's entrance, a bald-headed boy sat with a koto on his knees. While Korko took off his coat and shoes to honor the hallowed ground, he frowned, eager to understand the boy's identity. "Hello. You're not a priest either." "Oh no, I am. This mortal is, honored pilgrim." "Why would he not be?" the young priest asked, clearly still surprised from Korko's sudden entry. "You can drop the formalities. I don't really mind. And I asked because I just don't see many Pasha priests playing music. Aren't you guys all about meditation and watering flowers?" "Ah, yes. The Grand Reader suggested I should train to focus through music, since I cannot hold meditation well." As soon as he dropped his formal speech for a more natural approach, the priest's stutter was cured, calmed down by Korko's direct attitude. "Is the Grand Reader still available tonight? I would like to see him for a reading." "Ah, yes." The boy's eyes went wide as he realized that he had neglected his duties all this time. "My deepest apologies. This apprentice will inform the master post. Haste." His eyes fixated on Korko's clothes, the boy began to sweat in the cold, before he ran off to do his duties. From the expensive silk the prince wore under his fur coat, the priest must have realized his guest status. With a smile, Korko watched as the boy jumped up and ran towards the back, his zither abandoned and thrown to the floor like yesterday's clothes. As if it was natural, Korko walked forward, picked up the instrument and tried a few notes. After what seemed to be mere moments, the young priest was back. "The master will see you, honored guest." Called back to reality, Korko lifted his head, uttered a "thank you," and followed the apprentice inside. Underscore 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 underscore. Pure darkness filled the room Korko had been led to. Only the biting cold all around him reminded the prince of his own existence. In his surroundings, the only source of light were the moon and the stars visible through a large, round hole in the ceiling. "What can this old priest do for you, guest?" While he was only a voice out of the darkness at first, Korko's eyes soon adjusted and peeled back the shadows. Revealed from within the darkness, a hunched silhouette sat towards the far side of the room. First the prince gave a silent bow, before he sat down opposite the old priest. With movements which seemed so familiar even after all these years, he put a few pieces of gold into the bowl which had been readied in front of the Grand Reader. "I want a reading for a descended family member," Korko said. "The name," came back a voice like gravel. "My father. Tita Caelestis Pluritac." With no show of surprise despite the emperor's name, the Grand Reader grabbed a small clay pot by his side and poured a strange liquid over the gold pieces in the bowl. Like a living creature, the liquid rushed out of the cup until the gold was fully submerged. Although Korko couldn't see much, he still recognized the silvery liquid as mercury, or quicksilver as it was called here. Accompanied by a low hum, the Grand Reader stared at the metal's mirrored surface, an attempt to read the thoughts of the stars in their reflections. After quite a while, he once again looked up to fulfill Korko's request. "It seems as if this soul's path is troubling indeed. The spirit is restless, the path is blocked. A most trying journey and a long descent await him." Shocked, Korko tried to get up for a second, before he remembered his hallowed surroundings. After a deep breath, he still had to seek an explanation. How could that be? Even up here, my father's name and status should be well known. With his words, the priest had implied that there was trouble on his father's, the emperor's, journey through the underworld. An unusual reading, since the imperial burial rites were designed specifically to guarantee smooth passage. With the stoic calm of an ancient tree, the priest illuminated his reading. Young prince seems unaware of the tasteless dealings of his brothers. Their actions have dirted all aspects of life, even the path to the gods. A great calamity awaits. In that case, I want to ask the reader for some of the lake's celestial water. To purify my father's spirit. Helpless, Korko did whatever he could. Of course, young prince. Will young prince begin his descent right away? No, I will meditate on the stars for the night and be on my way by dawn. There is still many estates I have to visit. I need the calm, time to think. Although he had not received the answers he had wanted, Korko still got up and turned to leave the room without a complaint. Even so, the old priest held him back. Young prince may be well advised to pass by the estate of Lord Nazika. Prince will not find shelter there. Confused by the cryptic message, Korko turned back and studied the priest's expression. However, there wasn't much to see within the darkness. And why is that, he asked. Lord Nazika has blocked off all entry to his estates and moved here, to find peace in meditation. The Lord has been here since the Emperor's departure. The man at the lake, Korko realized, what would a lord do here for so long? Lord Nazika searches peace in the face of destiny. Young prince has been away for far too long. Prince might not know of the solstice oracle. Although he could not see the priest, Korko still felt the profound sadness, the deep resignation in the old man's voice. The stars have foretold great turmoil. Man's greedy and wicked nature has angered the earth. The tiger will sink into darkness. The serpent will bite off the road to heaven. Lost in thought, Korko looked at the dark silhouette for a few seconds, before he turned to leave, without a word. Outside, he found that the young priest had waited for his return, so the prince let himself be guided back into the light and warmth of the entry hall. All guests have been discouraged by the solstice oracle, honored guest, the boy said. Even master is distraught. With the sudden arrival of the foreigners and the death of the emperor, many have given up, ready to submit to their fate. It is the beginning of the apocalypse. Korko sighed in response. If there was a danger to their people, none of this would help them fight for their future. To be honest, I've never liked this fatalistic part of the Pasha faith. In that regard, my perspective hasn't changed, despite everything. Say. In contemplation, Korko looked towards the koto he had placed down before, reminded of days long past. From within his memory, he reached for a bit of skill from this world and a piece of knowledge from another. Can I borrow your koto for a while? Of course, honored guest. I cannot play the thing anyways. Right on the lake's shore, Korko sat down on the bare snow while he tuned the instrument by ear. With all his heart, he tried to remember the melody he had heard a long time ago, in a different life. You know, he said to the apprentice monk who watched him from inside an open door, I can't resent the people like your master does. And I can't resent the stars like that man across the lake. With a single, shaky note, and then a second, Korko began to play. His memory was still excellent, but he hadn't practiced in a long time and found it difficult to play a new piece by memory alone. Yet as time went on, his fingers began to produce the harmonies in his head. There is nothing malignant about the stars, the world or the people. I also don't think turmoil is always a bad thing. Turmoil means change. Change can be good. If the turmoil is inevitable, let me be the one to bring it about. There are many things which need changing after all. From the lowest valleys to the highest mountains. Korko looked down to focus on his play. For the first time since he had arrived in Medalla, he felt at peace. As the night went on and his play became more adept, fluid music began to travel across the lake and up into the sky. When Korko looked back up, the sun had risen over the holy mountain and the shore across the lake was empty. He was no longer cold.